Here we go. We're live. It's the Fantasy Joes. This is the Drafterparty Day 1. We've got Peter Howard on the line with us so far. Peter, what's going on, my friend?
Not much, man. Just trying to make sense of the draft.
Yeah, we're so.
I'm actually just trying to get my running back model to run, so I have something to say. Trying to put all three in.
Are you guys hearing some feedback? Okay, so this is our first live. Yeah, this is our.
No, I think I'm not getting feedback. We're good to go.
Yeah, I don't hear anything.
I mean, Ryan, since we're live on air now, do you want to say something about my red face again?
No.
I just wanted to make sure to get that out of the way. It's finally nice here in Minneapolis, and I went and I got a new Vikings hat for this year, and figured tonight was a good day to debut it on the live YouTube broadcast. It's black because matching purple with anything else in your entire life is nearly impossible unless you're only wearing purple.
I can't hear anyone right now.
I mean, everyone's talking.
Oh yeah. I was like, I can continue talking, I guess.
I just figured out what was going on because I was playing like I had a tab open in my browser, so it's like a couple second delay, and I'm like, what's going on? Oh my god, this isn't working. This is the first time we've ever done it. So that was my issue. So I just had a tab open. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I've got like 7 open.
I just said the most interesting spot.
So let's try to get this back on track. So because some of our listeners might be listening to this like Monday morning on their way to work as the podcast. So let's reset. Peter, like for our listeners that don't know you, can you introduce yourself? I've been a big fan of Peter Howard's work for a long time. One of my favorite follows on Twitter. He just had a book that was released on Amazon. So Peter, do you want to talk about yourself and plug that for a second before we get into this draft talk?
I really don't want to spend time talking about myself.
That's so all right.
No one wants to know about me. I write for DLF. I write for Player Profiler. I've written for Fantasy Pros and 2QBEs.com as well. I'm originally from England. It's not a speech impediment. Don't worry. And it's actually part English, part Kentucky at this point, so I have no idea what I sound like. And I wrote a wide receiver guide for the 2018 draft, which so far is useless. We've only had 2 go off the board. But it really is once I can get the rest of them signed to a draft pick.
No, your guide is awesome. We're going to put it in the show links because I think most of our listeners will listen to this on Friday morning as the podcast. And we've got Jake joining us. Jake Anderson, what's going on?
What's going on, fellas? How's everybody doing?
We're great, man. I mean, Sonny Michel just went to New England, so our hearts are exploding here. No, man, this first live YouTube we've done. We've got no viewers so far, but hopefully that'll pick up here. But if not, people listen to this on Friday morning. So Jake, what's going on with you? Tell us about yourself.
Oh man, I don't think I can follow Peter there. I don't do anything fancy like that. I occasionally write some words for Dynasty League football. I'm obsessed with this Dynasty thing, just like all of you guys are. And I just try to enjoy it. That's really my thing. And I probably don't love it any more than you guys do. We're all in this boat together, and that's all I try to get out of it. This is just enjoyment. This is just hobby, and sometimes I write about it too.
No, that's cool. And yeah, nice. That's what we do. We all have our day jobs, and any guys that get together after the draft to do. There goes Lamar Jackson off the board to Baltimore.
Yeah.
So like a bunch of guys like us that we get together after the draft to talk about the draft to Dynasty implications. We're obsessed, and it's crazy and it's ridiculous. And this has been such a fun night. I mean, this is the end of this draft, right? With Lamar Jackson going to Baltimore and Sonny Michel going to New England. It's just what a fun way to end a crazy night. And guys that might have dropped off the board, or dropped down the board, they really didn't. With the Josh Allen stuff, with the stuff he put on Twitter, several years ago, didn't seem to impact his draft stock, maybe a little bit. The Sonny Michel, that neon knee medical report didn't scare the New England Patriots. So really interesting night. So what are you guys like? Any initial thoughts? I mean, not a lot of skill position players win, honestly.
Well, one I wanted to chime in. Peter, I did buy your wide receiver guide, even after there was no installment plan, which I mentioned on Twitter the other day. I was able to gather together, some coins and put it into my Venmo and take care of it. So I got it today, so I haven't been able to dive into it as much as I wanted. There was some fun like work stuff going on today, but I am very excited. I actually think the not having a bunch of receivers go in the first round makes it an even better purchase right now, and people can stay up and read it all night in anticipation for tomorrow. Yeah, I think most people thought more wide receivers go in the second round, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. It feels like the opposite of last year. It felt like last year there was a lot of movement to try and get skill position players, and this year it feels very much the opposite. If you need a payment plan for the $3, then by all means just contact me. I think we can figure something out on that. I have got to find some way of justifying the amount of hours I'm spending on this to my wife. I just have to, and that's what the $3 is. Hopefully, I'll be able to take the kids to the movies and say, look, that was worth the 3 months of constantly staring at the laptop. But yeah, as for the draft, well, who've we had? Moore and Ridley, and that's the order I think I have them in. And the more wide receivers that get drafted, the more that will go between Moore and Ridley. That's where I'm at right now. He went to Ridley went to Atlanta, didn't he?
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
I'd take Sanu. That would be my take on that.
That was a good landing spot.
I could really kill a room. Yeah.
No, I thought those were good landing spots for those wide receivers, though. And already we're seeing some shakeup, I think, in these rookie drafts we're going to see. What about the surprise of the night, guys, has to be Rashad Penny to Seattle. What do you guys think of that? I mean, that blew my mind.
I hate it. And the reason I think a lot of people are going to actually be excited about this, and I think a lot of people are probably bigger Penny fans than I am, but I'm not a big Penny guy, and I think he's being a little overvalued already. And now that he has this first round capital, I don't think I'm going to be having him in any rookie drafts. I think he's going to probably be locked in that 105, 106 in range for rookie drafts. And I don't think Seattle is a great landing spot anyways.
What didn't you like about him?
You know what? What I've been saying is it'd be better if he was a nickel or a dime.
Yeah.
But when I watched his tape, he kind of reminded me of D'Onta Foreman from last year. He had such massive holes to run through, and the competition he faced was not very good. I just don't see him being dynamic in the NFL. I think he's probably a 15-touch guy a game, 15 touches a game guy, and I don't think he's a great receiving threat. And obviously his pass blocking deficiencies could limit him to knocking down the field on third downs. You have J.D. McKissick there. He's a really good receiving threat. Chris Carson, I think, if he's back to health, I think it could be just a muddy situation. And that's the way I feel about Sony too. I'm not excited about either of those landing spots because of opportunity and market share that they're going to see in those situations. I'm really not excited about Sony. Penny came out. I've got a running back model, right? Not that I'm a mathematician or anything, but I try and find some statistical metrics to guide me, since I'm not, a genius film watcher. I just enjoy it. And what made him pop was the fact he's actually got one of the highest rushing yard market shares of any running back in this class. Like, he had 68% of rushing yards for his team in his final year, whereas Barkley only had 56. So as for the workload, he was actually sustaining market share ways, kind of the higher market share of any running back that went in the first round. So I don't know. Well, I mean, San Diego State's they're a running team. And another part is Donnell Pumphrey was the guy in that backfield just last year. And if he can't beat out Pumphrey, and yes, I Penny's definitely going to forecast to the NFL better than Pumphrey at 160 pounds. But yeah, that's another concern of mine is he wasn't really getting much playing time when Pumphrey was there just last year. So it's a combination of things. Part of it's gut feel too. When I watch his tape, he didn't really speak to me. And I'm a smart metrics guy like you are and some others, and so I don't have that kind of statistical backup, but that's just what I see on tape, and I generally trust my process. And sometimes it's hard to put into context for other people, but that's just my specific evaluation on him.
I think my thing that I really dislike is that the Seahawks took him in the first round. They traded away quite a few picks, and they don't have a lot left. And I just don't know what that team's going to be this year. It kind of
makes no sense.
Yeah, that's the only part, because I like Penny as a prospect. I think he'll have a great opportunity. And as I've learned through the years is that it's very hard to predict how somebody's going to fit into an offense right away. Like initially, for the most part, like now he's going to have first round pedigree going to Seattle, and he's going to be with Russell Wilson in that offensive line. And I just hope that they had a plan to really like how to use him, because I mean otherwise it's just been this kind of like, they've just been throwing things against the wall and waiting for something to stick. And now they take a running back in the first round when they have so many other needs. Like, it just is insane to me. They're just, it's just.
And guys, right? It surprised me. Like, that's why I want to know what Jake didn't like about him, because he came up high because of some of his numbers, but like, I didn't understand really why, because like, Geis is meant to be and is the better running back, I think. So I was interested in what Jake thought there, and it's just like Geis is, what's the word, marketed as a Seahawks style running, angry, runs to contact, just.
Well, he has that Marshawn.
And Penny really isn't. So
yeah. He can comp to Marshawn, so he definitely seemed to fit that mold there.
But at least the Seahawks don't care about pass blocking, so he doesn't have to worry about that kind of fall in the game. That's a good point. Well.
They'll find an undrafted free agent that played D tackle to be their new starting right guard. So,
well, who has it? Or like I played football in a few years, or the one basketball Font that was on. It was Fant, right?
Yeah.
And then when he went down, they're like, "Oh no, what are we going to do?" Like recruiting at rec league games and flag football matches, and anyway.
Now, do you guys see a running back run the top of the second round? Because you've got. Cleveland, the Giants again. They're not going to take a running back. Cleveland, Indianapolis, Tampa Bay. I mean, all those picks. There's 5 of those top 6 picks. Are we going to see these running backs go off the board? Is Darius Geis going to go off the board, you think, early in the second?
Well, Indianapolis with, back-to-back picks, 36 and 37, you got to think they're going to take someone, and it's probably going to be Geis if he's sitting there. And it will be a steal if they do, I think, at that point, for them.
Yeah, that's the only running back I think is going to be going early in day 2 here.
Yeah, Nick Whalen has joined the drafter party, I think, if he's got his audio going.
Yeah, what's up, boys?
Nick Whalen is a huge Darius Geis fan, right, Nick?
Not so much.
What do you think of these running backs off the board? With Penny, the surprise of the draft, I think we can all say, and then. Sony Michel, what do you think, Nick?
Well, honestly, I mean, this is what we live for, right? I mean, this was fun. This is what the draft's supposed to be. It's supposed to be not as predicted, right? No one knew, all the stuff was going to happen, and that kind of makes it enjoyable for us to watch. If it was what all our lists were supposed to be like, then it would be any fun. But I love it. Honestly, you think of Penny, and you look at what Seattle needs. They need a guy that can do lots of things. One underrated part that people probably don't really know about a lot is Penny is the tied for the lead for all-time leading kick return record. He had 7 in a college. I mean, think about that. That's kind of crazy for a running back his size, and he can catch the ball. And Seattle needs a guy that can do lots of stuff because they're lacking weapons there, even after losing Paul Richardson. Michelle, all the reports that came out, maybe New England, they just put him out there so people would let him follow them. Who knows? But I'm not a big Geis fan, as you guys know. I think that having him being maybe the 4th best running back off the board here, maybe later, kind of validates my concerns a little bit. I think there were his character things that might come true too. Then I know people are like, those aren't true. He didn't go 13 to Washington. He didn't go in the first round. So there must be some validity there.
So who's the 102 in like a non superflex draft, non 2 QB? What do you guys think? Because it was Geis. I mean, Geis was locked into that 102. Does it change after tonight?
I think he's going to go back there after he gets drafted, right? Like right now, everyone wants to trade the pick, but if he goes to Indianapolis, he's going to be the 102 again.
I mean, if he goes to Tampa Bay in the second round, I think easily locked into that 102.
You guys know, for me, man, I mean, Nick Chubb has been gaining ground on Darius Geis. And so for me, with Darius Geis falling now behind both Michelle and Rashad Penny out of the first round, I think for me, if I were on the clock, you know, for some crazy reason tonight I was doing a rookie draft and I didn't know it was going to happen tomorrow, I think I would likely take Chubb over Geis. As much as, you know, I mean, Chubb's the guy I want to have on my team. He's the guy I want to root for. You know, I'll be super interested to see where each of them land. I'm also suspicious, you know, coming into tonight, I was wondering if we might not see Chubb, and I still, you know, obviously into round 2, to see Chubb go over Geis wouldn't surprise me at all. So I think after what Geis did what Chubb did at the combine, he could sneak. And honestly, there's going to be people out there. I mean, Curtis Patrick is a guy who's been big on Rashad Penny. So I mean, if Geis falls to the mid or late second round, I think that you could have guys that would argue that Rashad Penny could be worth that 102. I mean, it's going to, you know, I think Seattle still has some offensive line issues, but the thing is that you talk about these guys that are in workhorse situations, and I think that Rashad Penny could end up being that guy. He can catch the football. He could end up being a 3-down back there in Seattle. So it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch the next 2 rounds unfold tomorrow night.
I'm just crying over my pro size shares, actually. So that's my main takeaway.
Since Penny's going to Seattle, he's going to break his leg. That seems to be their traditional running back go-to. It's not like he'll fracture his leg at some point. He'll come back strong, but
I think he's going to be shocked from seeing the holes that he saw in college from going to that offensive line. I think I think he could be in for a rude surprise there in Seattle.
So I do have I looked it up earlier. I was looking this up kind of today. One, I tweeted it out that something I discovered that I just hadn't noticed before. One, Kyle Shermer. So Pat Shermer's son is going to be a senior at Vanderbilt at quarterback. Nice 6'4" prospect. Has some accurate issues, just according to his stats. I haven't seen any watching film or anything on him. And so I was like, I bet they're going to take Barkley because next year it'll be the Shermer family at the Giants. But where I was leading with that is so Barkley to the Giants. One, did you kind of see this coming, and were you excited or not excited for it happening?
I saw it. I kind of expected it. I really don't try and predict the draft because it's a lot more fun when I'm not constantly updating the mock draft that I did. But Dave Gettleman kind of sealed it for me. He doesn't trade back. He's an unimaginative thinker and a really, really bad GM. So that pretty much sealed it. I think there wasn't. It was going to happen, you know.
Yeah, I don't think Barkley was very landing spot dependent as far as his perception goes and his fantasy output's going to go. So whether it was Cleveland or New York, I think it was an awful football move. But as far as, you know, we're not really talking football moves here. We're talking dynasty and fantasy prospects. So, Barkley's a beast. I think he's going to do well. I think he can overcome some of those limitations from that offensive line just because there's so many weapons outside. You got Evan Ingram, you got OBJ. They can't just focus on Barkley. And I think Barkley's going to be getting some slot reps too. I mean, he's going to run some routes in that offense. So he's not just going to get carries. He's going to get receptions there too.
Yeah, weirdly enough, it makes me a little bit excited for Eli Manning next year, of all things. The way Shermer's dealt with quarterbacks in his first years being offensive coordinator and what he does with teams and the offense that he runs, it's creative and it's innovative. And weirdly enough, count Greenwood as excited for Eli Manning's production next year. Probably no rushing touchdowns, but, you know, he might have like a yard or two here and there.
if he can't do well with those weapons, he really is done. And that's part of the problem is I think he might be underwhelming just like he's been the last few years. And then what do you do next year? I mean, because you drafted Barkley, I don't think you're going to be in the middle of the pack now. I don't think you're going to have a top 10 pick anytime soon, unless there's some major injuries to that team. Because I think their roster is pretty solid overall. I don't think they're a top 2 team as far as really bad rosters in the league. So for me, it was a no-brainer to take quarterback there. And I think that's going to hurt them. And that could even actually end up hurting Barkley in the near future.
You think Davis Webb is a buy? I know that sounds crazy, guys, but there was the buzz that they really liked him and they don't really know what they have in him. Is that just crazy for me to throw that out there? Am I crazy for saying that, or do any of you guys think Davis Webb might be a sneaky buy right now for cheap?
I don't think so. 2 QB super flex. I mean, if you can add them for free and you have deep rosters, I think it might be worth it. I certainly wouldn't be paying anything for him.
I don't think you'd have to pay anything for him, but I think it's obviously. I mean, they could take Rudolph's still on the board, right? They could turn around and take Rudolph here at the top of the second round, I suppose. But
that's gross.
Yeah, that's really that's another poor.
He was sneaking up in the draft narrative street. So
I mean, ultimately, this is what I think. I mean, this is what all teams think about. Okay, they think about: am I one player away? Am I a couple players away? Or am I rebuilding? And you want to look at the Giants. They obviously thought, hey, if we can surround Eli with an elite player, then we can make a run for 2 or 3 years. And that's what they have to be thinking. And also when you think about it, OBJ doesn't sound like he wants to be there long term. So if we're like, well, this is what we got for a couple of years, we're going to go for it. And I'm a little contrarian this way. I mean, we've seen how many quarterbacks come and go, and maybe they're good or maybe they're average or bad like Ryan Tannehill, or they flop. But how many elite quarterbacks really are there? We know Barkley's going to be good. I know everyone wants to throw out Trent Richardson. Okay, shut up, right? That's whatever. You know what I mean? Anybody can bust. Okay, I get it. But he's going to be really good. And what if you just continually said, hey, we're going to take really good football players. We don't care if it's Quentin Nelson, a guard, or a running back. We're going to surround our team that way and fill in the rest with free agency and just go from there. Like you can get a Case Keenum. You know what I mean? We've seen these other quarterbacks that have risen up. You don't have to spend the premium and the chance that they're going to bust.
I think that's fair, especially when the question comes down to, can Eli Manning be as good as Peyton Manning in his last season, but with much better skill position players? That's a fair point.
Yeah. Well, when you look at the Broncos, right, with Elway, they surrounded him with a running game, and he made a run. Look at Brady; they just got him a running back. Look at Eli; they just got him a running back. They're trying to extend these careers by taking pressure off of them.
Don't you think that's in part just, I don't know, we reflect the NFL sometimes. The fact they're all stuffing these running backs onto the roster is because running backs just did really well. So they all want running backs because, they're
it's a type of thing.
Yeah.
So should we talk about quarterbacks, or should we talk about Matt Patricia's outfit this evening that he wore? Did any of you guys catch that, Matt Patricia?
I didn't see it.
Oh my gosh, he was wearing he needs to see a new salesman at Men's Warehouse. I'm telling you guys, because
was it baggy?
Well, it was like this gray sports coat over this black shirt, this super ugly tie, and I was just like, you just got you're an NFL head coach. You gotta up your game for draft night.
Yeah. Has Hootie ever cared?
Yeah.
I kind of like that they
cares about his appearance. Yes.
Okay, maybe. Okay, we'll talk about quarterbacks then.
It's not like he just got signed by the Yankees and now he's got to be all.
I need some other examples of better outfits, Ryan. If we're going to be comparing this to other drafts, I
don't know. Look at the Cowboys war room. All those guys were dressed in their nice suits. They had their Brooks Brothers suits on. They look good.
Think about it. One of my favorite parts of the whole draft was how Goodell got booed every time. The crowd, but they never gave up. It was always just. It wasn't even like a loud boo the whole time. It was always like, oh.
Even when the high school player, the Texas football players came on, the Arlington football players, they're still booing them, and he's turning around and clapping at them, like, look, I've got the high school football players with you. You can't boo me.
And nobody in the crowd cares unless it's their team's pick. They're all just drinking and they're just like, I thought it was just so funny because it wasn't overly emphatic. Nobody was really that into it, but they're like, you got to give it to him a little bit each time.
So let's talk about QBs. I mean, where do we even begin? Trey, Baker Mayfield going to Cleveland. Why don't you kick it off? I know you're thrilled about that.
Well, I'm just excited because I think that Baker Mayfield's stepping into an incredible spot there because Tyrod Taylor is serviceable in that there's no reason that Baker Mayfield should take snaps as a starter this year. So he's got a year that he can sit. It's not like Cleveland has playoff aspirations, but I look 12 months down the road and the weapons that he has there. They brought in Carlos Hyde, which, the much maligned Carlos Hyde, which you guys know, Ryan and Will. I'm a fan of Carlos Hyde as a talent. Duke Johnson, an underrated running back and pass catcher. They signed Jarvis Landry, another really underrated pass catcher that can get open and be a reliable target across the middle. You got Josh Gordon. The potential, what's going to happen with Corey Coleman, who knows, David Njoku. The weapons that he's going to have there, what they're building there in Cleveland, not to mention, they've got several picks here. I think they've got 2 of the first 4 picks, right, in the second round as well. So, they're just loading up. I love Baker Mayfield's moxie. I think for me, he's going to be the quarterback that I most want to own on dynasty teams moving forward because I think he's going to be fun to own. He's a guy that I hope of all the quarterbacks in this draft, he's the one that I want to see succeed. Lamar Jackson as well. I'm a little disappointed at his landing spot, but I do think that seeing a couple of these guys here come into spots where they can sit for a year, I think super important. So I'm excited. You guys know I've been a big fan of what the Browns are doing. I've predicted that they're going to make the playoffs in the next 3 years. I stand behind that. I'm pulling for them, and I was happy to see. They could have gone a lot of different directions there at the top, but I'm excited to see what Mayfield can bring to that team.
They can't ever just do it all the way right, can they, though? I've liked what they have been doing. I love some of the position players they've added. But Mayfield, is the best quarterback in the class as far as I evaluate them go. But, if they traded down from 4, they could have done this again next year, right? They could have just owned next year's draft as well. But they have to just, not do it perfectly all the way.
Yeah,
it was really tilting. It was like
the Ward pick was a little bit of a surprise. I know there was some chatter about that they could take him, but I think a trade back scenario would have been beneficial to them. As far as Mayfield goes, I'd be surprised if he doesn't start week 1 over Tyrod. And then my quarterback one, I love. I don't know if I love the landing spot. I was just happy that he got selected, and it wasn't Buffalo. Is Josh Rosen. I felt really excited about that. I think he's pro ready. I think he could definitely start week 1 too. And if not, we know Sam Bradford's knees probably won't hold up. So he's going to get some playing time, at least get a little bit of time with Fitz there. I'm excited about that landing spot as well.
Third quarter of week 1, Jake. He'll be in the game. Don't worry.
That sounds fair.
It's not going to take very long.
Unless Bradford has like a hard sneeze in preseason.
Yeah. No, so I'm excited about those top 3 guys for sure. In terms of getting, playing time with Baker Mayfield, Darnold, and Rosen. And then, Jackson to the Ravens. I think he'll sit behind Flacco at least for a couple of years. But it's interesting. So where do we rank the quarterbacks in terms of do we rank them differently in 1 QB leagues versus 2 QB or Superflex leagues? What do you think, Nick Whalen, about the QBs?
Well, my rankings are different than anybody's. So before the combine, I had Mayfield. Well, Rosen and Mayfield were in the top tier with Rosen above him. So I agree there. I'm a big Rosen fan. I don't care that he's confident and doesn't care that he's got a chip on his shoulder. I like a guy with a chip on his shoulder. But the thing that people don't, I don't think a lot of people are really good at looking at film. They watch highlights. Watch film. Rosen and Mayfield has such a grasp of their offense and making multiple reads that you look at Mayfield in Cleveland and I'm just like, whoa, all those weapons. Oh, he's covered. Go to Njoku up the seam, he's covered. I'm going to check down to Landry or check down to Duke Johnson. He's going to make that offense just roll. And honestly, I don't think we got to wait 3 years. I think Cleveland is very, very underrated moving forward. I think that they could really surprise. You think of Baltimore, I would take Cleveland over Baltimore. I would take them over Cincinnati right now. And I know Pittsburgh's good, so I'm not going to go there, but they're on the rise for sure. I know Denzel Ward, yeah, that's a little bit of a stretch. Looking at Darnold, I agree with you. Darnold's my fourth best quarterback, and I have so many concerns about him, and people don't talk about him. He had 22 turnovers this last year. Nobody talks about that. They shit all over Josh Allen, who had cut his interceptions in less than half in 1 year. But it's easy to trash him. But let's forget about Darnold and how terrible his footwork is in the pocket, and how terrible he is after his first reads. So for me, it's Mayfield, because he has more weapons too, by the way, Rosen, and then it's just kind of a mess. I don't like Jackson. He's my sixth best quarterback. Obviously, the NFL doesn't agree that he's a franchise quarterback if he falls to 32. And I don't like Darnold's landing spot. I'm Allen's my third guy. I know people don't agree with me there, but he's going to be asked to win everything in Buffalo. So I think he'll run and throw and try and make it work. So both of those guys are in a group of like, yuck. And it's Mayfield and Rosen on top.
What's wrong with the Jets as a landing spot? I mean, maybe short term it's bad, but long term, I mean, don't you think he'll sit there for a while? You think they're going to be pressured into playing him because they've got they sign a bunch of kind of Teddy Bridgewater and who else? I'm trying to think.
McCown.
Yeah, McCown. Come on, McCown. He's. So what you don't like about the Jets? Obviously this next year maybe, but long term that's a bad spot.
Well, that's a big market. That's a lot of pressure. Look at Buffalo. Is that as much pressure? Not even close. Look at Arizona. Not as much pressure. But New York, you mess up a little bit there, it all kind of comes down. Look at Sanchez. I mean, he got ostracized, and I think that's a part of this. And there's not a lot of weapons there. Who's going to be his guru? Their head coach is a defensive guy, and I have concerns about his game to start with, and that's a lot of chips not in his favor. So I'm against Darnold moving forward, and I think they botched that pick. I think they could have waited at 6. They could have had those second-round picks, and they could have built around with some weapons. Look now. Think if they could have added a Geis or a Chubb and a Sutton or a wide receiver to go with a quarterback. That would be phenomenal right now.
Yeah, they could have gotten Rosen at 6.
Oh, how did Arizona trade a third and get up to 10?
I don't understand it. They played that so well. They played it so well, and I was so happy he didn't go to Buffalo. I didn't really want any quarterback. I didn't want Rosen to go there because I really feel like he should have went to New York. He should have went to the Giants at 2. I would have loved that for him. That would have been. He would have been.
Cardinals a good consolation prize, though. I'd rather go there than anywhere else that was taken.
It wasn't a bad landing spot, but I think he could succeed really anywhere. I just thought Buffalo would be the hardest spot for him to succeed out of those quarterback needy teams.
If not the Giants, and I'm fine with Atlanta. I'm really excited about Chad Williams now.
So did it get easier for Cleveland to catch the Steelers with Martavis Bryant getting traded to the Raiders, guys?
Who?
I love Martavis, but I mean, I don't think he was really in the Steelers' plans. There was talk about them trading him last year, so it doesn't really surprise me. And I don't know how much opportunity he's going to have in Oakland either. So I think it's almost a non-talking point. I don't think it really changes his value a whole lot.
You don't think so? With Gruden being there, he's going to the Raiders. Derek Carr back from injury. QB1 this year. Yeah, I mean, it's a good time to sell Martavis Bryant, right? If you've got him on your team, would you guys agree?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really good time to sell. I think Bryant's someone that you really have to do well with. You have to coach him well, you have to train him well, you have to prepare him well, and he's a phenomenal player and athlete. And he's not going to get any of that where he is. And left to himself, he's not Antonio Brown. He's not Larry Fitzgerald, these guys who are just going to work on their craft and work on the game plan and stick their nose in the book and just do it themselves. He's someone that has to be managed, and he's not going to get managed in Oakland. He's going to be asked to go be an athletic marvel, and that's going to do badly, and he's going to be the next Cordero Paris. And that's my feeling on it. Every time I speak, there's like this 10-second pause afterwards, and I don't know if it's my microphone.
We're just trying to.
I'm just that bad, and everyone's like, "Wow, did he say that?"
I mean, in a way, isn't
that sucks. He should not have said that. That's what.
I mean, in a way, isn't that what Josh Gordon is too? I mean, Josh Gordon is an athletic marvel, and now he's got lots of talent surrounding him, and he's got Hugh Jackson as his coach. So do we, he didn't play that well last year. I know people want to believe it. He didn't play that well, but he's ranked so much higher. I mean, it says something that Oakland paid a 3rd-round pick for a guy that was unwanted. Someone wants him at least. I mean, I think it's worth a gamble. I mean, Jordy Nelson will man the slot. It kills all my Andre Holmes shares. Joking. They don't really have a tight end. So I shouldn't. Jared Cook
had a good year last year.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. But I mean, I think it's a better NFL move than a fantasy move, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, Cordero Patterson's a good NFL player. I wasn't ragging on him for being that.
I love Cordell Patterson.
Yeah, exactly. He's just not going to be your wide receiver one.
I hope he gets, maybe not with this Sony draft pick. I was really hoping that they would maybe get him in the backfield in New England.
Yes.
He was phenomenal his rookie year.
Yeah, right.
And I was jumping up and down when the Vikings took him because he's still the most electrifying player I've seen in space that I've evaluated. And I think he's still got that. He's not a route runner. His hands are inconsistent. He's another guy that's not going to dive into the playbook on his own. He needs to be managed as well. But you get him the ball in space where he doesn't have to think and he can react and be an athlete. Man, he's still special. He's still got that.
That's kind of what I mean about Brian as well. He's someone who can do very special things, but you have to use him to do that. You need a coach that's not got 2 lanes, and if you don't fit into one of these lanes, then he doesn't know how to use you.
Right. And to give you guys a big useless piece of information, but I wrote an article and Matt Wallman's RSP on Cordell Patterson when he came out. I watched every game I could of him, which covered all but like one, I think, out of Tennessee. And I watched Tavon Austin and then Robert Woods is just like to compare. His rate at making people miss was so unbelievable in college. There were only 2 times that I counted that Patterson tried to make somebody miss at the first guy and didn't. It was like, it's so incredible. I was like mind blowing. And you look at, Tavon Austin, he's pretty wiggly. Woods isn't, but like the rate they were not even close. And it was not even like one way. It was like juking, power, spin. Like he could do it all. It was, but I drink the Kool-Aid too. I'm with you there.
I think, even just like, as far as him showing his abilities, even moving the kick up 5 yards, I think that even hurt him a little bit because he just doesn't get the opportunity to return kicks even. So he was killing it there for the Vikings even after his rookie season. So,
hey guys, can we talk offensive linemen that we're taking tonight? The reason I want to talk about them is because does that impact the value of players? Well, we were thinking about Billy Price to Cincinnati. Does that help Joe Mixon? And maybe we saw the writing on the wall with that. Do any of these offensive linemen landing spots excite you about skill position players?
Well, the Bengals needed to do something. They needed to start somewhere with that offensive line. I still think they have a lot of holes, and I'm a big Mixon fan as far as talent wise. I don't know how much it affects him. I think the rest of this draft has to play out. I was surprised that the Lions went offense. I really expected them to take a defensive player with Patricia there. Let's see who else was taken. I thought the Raiders pick was awful. I'm not a Colton Miller fan. Why would you not take Derwin James there? That was the steal of the draft. Again, the Chargers that defense is going to be so good, especially that secondary and that pass rush. And then,
a quick look at last year. The Chargers allowed the second least amount of points against last year. And now they had a guy like Derwin James, who I felt like coming into this year was being touted as a really, really high pick. So I think I'm pretty excited for the Chargers next year.
I was actually thinking that. I was going to say that just the other day. I was sitting around like, why aren't we all running around buying Chargers players? I mean, what don't they have? They have this phenomenal defense. They have this star wide receiver and Keenan Allen. Tyrell Williams, believe me or not, he's a star wide receiver, and he's certainly one hell of a deep threat by any way you want to measure it, and so he can play that role too. And then you've got Hunter Henry. It's like, oh, just one of the best tight ends that have come out in recent years. And then Phillip Rivers, who's just Pro Bowl quarterback. It's like, why are we not like?
Well, until they get a really good kicker, I'm out.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's basically it, right? Like,
what's that punter look like?
Oh yeah, but if they lose another game, if they lose another like 5 games by a missed field goal, it's going to be heartbreaking.
That's what it is, isn't it? It's just the fact the Chargers should have been fantastic the last 3 years and haven't been for some reason.
But I think that's important to note for their defense, though. I think their running game there is going to be important because they're going to be. The offense is. I honestly believe with where they're going is going to be a little bit slower than it's been, and you're going to see more rushing opportunities late in games. And so they're, a guy, Melvin Gordon. I know they signed him for his. They tacked on his 5th year, and we'll see how the next rounds go. But a guy like him, I've been trying to buy on put out feelers for people who are low on him or might have listened to a bunch of like podcasts or something like that, just because I think next year with the way this team is going, maybe in the next 2 years, I think he's going to be just a stud as far as like volume goes and touchdowns and production. I think it's only going to go up for him. But after that, whatever, if I can get 2 good years of Melvin Gordon, I'll take that all day.
Well, that's really all we're looking for any running backs. Really, is that 2, 3 to 5 year window. And I wasn't a big Melvin Gordon fan coming out. I mean, I think he was my running back 3 or 4 that year. But I'm on the same boat. I mean, I wait till I don't like a player until his value gets to a point where it's a clear buying opportunity, and his value is definitely sunk. And I've bought him this offseason too, so I like that.
People are really expecting him to be replaced, or if not replaced, the Austin Eckler role to be beefed up or taken away by someone else in this draft. And he's not a receiver. I mean, Cordero Patterson as well. This is true as well. You can see in their market share and their college production that neither of them could do what they're being expected of. But Melvin Gordon's often one of those running backs held up as, look, they didn't catch passes in college, but they did in the pros. But the problem with him in the pros is that he doesn't catch passes well. So they are looking to replace that. But as far as a running back goes, he's actually been one of the top 5 running backs in the league in terms of efficiency. The only way I think we can measure it accurately. And so he keeps getting hammered because of his inefficiency in the passing game, but he was never a great pass catching back. So yeah, it's a really good time to buy low on him. Would have been a quicker way of saying that.
Well, to go back to your original point of just offensive line and how this affects things moving forward. I mean, I agree with you guys on Melvin Gordon. I go for a 2-year window and Melvin Gordon's getting used. I don't care what his yards per carry is. Right. He helps me win championships. But we look at some of the offensive linemen. I mean, Quentin Nelson going 6 to the Colts. That was a no-brainer. I'm a Bears fan. I was hoping he was going to fall. He didn't.
Oh man, Whalen, me too. God, I was like, oh my God, Quentin Nelson is still there. I mean, I'm happy with who they got, but with Roquan Smith. But anyway,
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but that helps. That helps Luck, right? Stay upright. That helps Marlon Mack. The Colts are going to take somebody at the top of the 2nd round, and they're going to be really high in rookie drafts. You guys have kind of talked about that. We keep going on. Mike McGlinchey going to the 49ers was a surprise, but that helps out everybody. You know what I mean? That's going to help out. I'm not a McKinnon fan, but that's going to help out those truthers.
Yep.
That's going to help out, keep Jimmy G upright. That makes a lot of sense. And you keep on going down the line. I mean, you guys talked about helping Joe Mixon. That Billy Price pick helps out AJ Green, Andy Dalton, John Ross. There is value there, by the way. I'm buying all over the place because he's like free, or they're paying me to take him off the roster. For Frank Ragnow going to the Lions, that is good there too. Helps out that whole offense. So I think the thing is not to think about just the running game, but to think about how it's going to help everybody, because the more time Tom Brady has to stand upright, the better chance they had at winning that Super Bowl, or getting it to Tony Michel or whomever else. So yeah, I liked the fit so far. The only one I didn't like is the one you guys talked about, Colton Miller. That was such a bad pick.
That was maybe the second. I'm sorry, that was maybe the second surprise of the draft after Sonny Michel. That just seemed like such a reach for a guy that's such a project, right? I mean, it just seems really high for him.
Haven't we learned anything about just taking offensive tackles because they test well? I mean, how many? It's year after year that you see these offensive tackles, and yeah, these teams are needy, but a good combine is not the biggest measurement for these offensive tackles. But going back to Colton Miller being a bad pick, I don't understand the Hayden Hurst love, especially for like dynasty circles. Like, he's going to be 25 when the season starts, and it takes time for tight ends to develop if you're not Evan Ingram. So
I only just found out they took Hayden Hurst.
I don't understand that. You got Goddard. How do you not take Goddard? You're going to take a tight end. Man, we would have been excited about that first round capital for him, or even.
Well, they know they don't break out until they're 26, so like let's advance that.
I mean, Jake, I'm not sure there's any take we don't agree on so far. Hayden Hurst is about the same level of talent as everybody else.
Right.
And Baltimore, they took Max Williams. He didn't work out. They had so many needs there.
Max Williams is
name any tight end they took.
Max Williams is younger than Hayden Hurst.
I've got Max Williams on rosters.
I mean, it's a terrible pick. It's a terrible pick. And I disagree with Ozzie Newsome trading 2 seconds and a exchange of fourths for Lamar Jackson too. So Ozzie, way to go out with a bad bang, in my opinion.
I actually do like Lamar there. I was happy for him. I do see. I have a problem with his feet, with his footwork. His base is so narrow when he throws. And you know, that wristy throwing motion, that concerns me too. The ball can sail. But you can't deny for fantasy purposes, if he gets on the field, we saw it for Tyrod for years where his fantasy ceiling is so high because of that running ability. So I still like Lamar Jackson, and although his floor is low, I think his ceiling is very high. For fantasy at least.
I'd say replace Flacco with him, you know. In 2018,
yesterday,
to be honest.
But they're paying him. They're paying him in the 20 million.
They can't.
2 years. So what do they do?
How about some opinions on DJ Moore going to the Panthers? I know that was a pretty heavily mocked pick. Like, as far as is invaluable as mock drafts are, that it seemed like this one was pretty accurate. I saw him going there in quite a bit of at least Twitter fun. People choosing DJ Moore to go there. I just feel like they have built, a group of a dozen slot guys now that they all have in Carolina, and I just don't know what they're going to do with them.
I love DJ Moore. I love him. He's my wide receiver 1 in this class. I don't think that's a great fit for him because where Cam Newton is very good is downfield. And I don't think DJ Moore is that type of receiver. I think he's a yak guy. He's a guy to get to. I mean, he can get open short, intermediate. I don't see him as a great deep threat. And like you said, I think he's going to be more of a slot wide receiver. And you're already using McCaffrey there, and you have some other slot receivers on that offense. I don't love that landing spot as much as I like him as a player.
Yeah, I was conflicted.
Especially given the draft capital they spent last year on Curtis Samuel. It's kind of a puzzling. And Devin Funchess is kind of like their, quasi pseudo wide receiver 1. So, yeah, I was a little bit puzzled by that pick, but that's my in-state team. So I'm trying to be optimistic. Yeah. I think that it'll be interesting to see how they deploy him and how they plan to use him.
I think they should.
They felt highly enough.
I think they should have gone like a cornerback there in the first round. I just didn't like taking any wide receivers in the first round. I didn't see the value there. Yeah. And I think it's a deep class is unsexy as it is. I just don't understand taking a wide receiver in the first round when you do have other needs. You have some offensive line needs and then secondary needs. I mean, defense, you could always build that up. So I think they could have gone a quarterback there. And I would have liked to see like a James Washington in the second round, somebody that can take the top off of defense and can win deep,
Hey Peter, what is your like you're doing your model? What does it say about DJ Moore, and what do you feel about the Carolina fit?
Yeah, I was just looking that up actually, and being taken in the first round with age 19 breakout age. DJ Moore has like a 68.8% chance of being in the top 24 in the first 3 years of his career. That's how I broke it down for catch report I did, he's the most likely to succeed in this class based on how much he produced in college and when he produced it, which is a really key feature. As far as going to Carolina I felt a lot like Jake. I was like, it didn't seem like great value as much as I love more. And I like the fact the NFL just like put a stamp on, you just don't understand because you don't watch tape. Because I've heard that a few times. It's like, well, the NFL watches plenty of tape and they also think he's a wide receiver one. So, yeah, I love the player. As far as the situation goes, I've got this pet thing of everyone says he didn't do that in college, so he can't with running backs. But then when you mention about wide receivers, they're like, no, he can only catch slot passes. It's like, well, Golden Tate, who you're all comparing him to, was a deep threat in college. So can we just like accept that we don't know what DJ Moore is? He was on a terrible team. He was the most talented player on that team. And he was talented enough that they gave him 53% of opportunity, and he produces 53% of all touchdowns and yards for that team in his last year. So he was doing everything because no one else could do anything as well as he could do it. That doesn't mean he was just a slot receiver. He just meant he was also the best slot receiver they had. So they fed him those targets too. I don't know that he can't go deep. And I haven't said that. Peter? Yeah.
I'm an anti-DJ Moore hype guy here, so I have many questions on everything that you said. If we want to have a little bit of a debate here, what is breakout age? I would love to know what early in his career he did that is breakout age before 2017.
Sure. I have him as breaking out at age 19. What breakout age is when you own 20% of a team's touchdowns and yards. So it's a market in and of itself, right? So the team produces, say, 1,000 yards in a season. So that's the market. And if a player produces 60% market share, then he has 600 yards. So he has 600 out of that 1,000 for the entire team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you said breakout age is 20%?
Yeah, when you own both 20% of the combined touchdowns and yards. And the earlier you do that, the earlier you've broken out.
Right.
To walk on a field at 18 years old against, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds with more experience and more, frankly, size and physical development, and produce 20% of the team's touchdowns and yards is a remarkable feat, to the point that whatever the NFL is using to evaluate wide receivers has also been reflecting in breakout age, to the point where pretty much anyone that breaks out at age 18, so has 20% or more of the team's yards and touchdowns, and gets drafted by round 3. Almost no wide receiver that does that at age 18 gets drafted outside of the 3rd round. So the NFL is valuing something that's equating to breakout age as well. DJ Moore did it at age 19, which is the most common breakout age for successful, or just in general, wide receivers that get drafted.
So you're saying freshman year when he went 25 for 357 and 3, or his sophomore year went 41, 6, 37 and 6? Because to me, either of those numbers aren't impressive at all. And I know.
Well, that's the thing that you compare. Sorry, I'm talking.
I know you're comparing to their overall passing stats.
Yeah.
I personally don't care about that. I care about, and then we want to look at this year and how people are excited about how he did in his combine. Yet 1/3 of his yards and 1/2 of his touchdowns came against FCS opponent Towson and Northwestern, and he accumulated 92 yards against Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio State, the only guys that were even worth a damn. So to me, like, I'm a film guy, I'm not a stats guy, but to me, I want to see you produce against some good teams, or see you produce some really good stats over multiple years, and Moore didn't do that. And so when I hear people tout breakout age and market share, I want to see a guy that's produced for multiple years. I mean, Cortland Sutton has produced 31 touchdowns the last 3 years and has been top 10, top 15 receiving yards the last 2 years. That's something that I want to see. Now, he's my wide receiver one. I get that. We want to talk about poor quarterback play. DJ Moore's had poor quarterback play, but so has Calvin Ridley, Sutton, Auden Tate, even going down the list. So to me, like, I just don't see him breaking out. He averaged 12.9 yards per reception. It's really low. Wide receiver screen, wide receiver screen.
Well, that's part of what market share does. It's meant to take it's meant to put it in context, right? I mean, what's more impressive, counting 2,000 yards, an offense that literally had no competition, and so it threw for these are fictional numbers, obviously 8,000 yards, or catching 100 yards when the offense was only able to manage, only able to muster 200 yards in total. To me, the fact that you are the wide receiver offense for that team is much more impressive. It means you're the most talented player on the field. And what I said when I wrote this up, it doesn't really matter what sport you play. There's that player that everyone wants to have the ball when it really matters, right? There's just, you look up, it really needs to go right. And so you look for that guy. And that's what market share is indicating. Players that have phenomenal market share are the ones that the coaches and everyone on the team know needs to have the ball when it matters. And if you're breaking out to the point that, to a 20% market share at age 18, which DJ Moore didn't do, he did it at 19, or to his tune of 53% of yards in his final season, that's that guy for that team. He's just a phenomenal player within that context. And the reason I think it's valuable, especially over counting stats, is counting stats aren't predictive. You can catch 2,000 or 3,000 yards in 3 years, and of the players that do that, you'll find a very low hit rate, because the counting stats don't tell you that they're a good player, because it's different context, like you're saying, different competition, and also different success levels for that offense. But if you look at market share, it's actually predictive. The only thing that's more predictive of a wide receiver actually being successful in the NFL is draft capital. So, I mean, you can not like it, and I get that. I mean, it's weird talking percentages when we're talking about this most physical of the game, but if you want to know who's more likely to be a top 24 wide receiver, the only thing that can predict that anywhere near as well as draft rounds, so opportunity, is market share. And that's why I value it.
Hey, Whalen, I've got a question for you. So I'm not a film guy, right? But I watched DJ Moore play in that Northwestern game, and to me, on tape, he looks pretty good. I know Northwestern is not this elite Big Ten defense, but they're still a Power 5 school. So you didn't like him on tape, is what you're saying, Nick?
I watched 11 of his games, and I think that he's terribly inconsistent. I think that he doesn't play up to his testing ability, which people were gaga over what he did in tights with no defense or pads on. I think that his hands are inconsistent. Against Mike Hughes, he had a football go off his hands, then his helmet in the air. Mike Hughes housed it for 40 yards. I mean, that's the wide receiver. I mean, again, he's not a terrible player, but DJ Moore, I don't see that. I don't see a guy that completely dominated. I see a guy that did well against Northwestern. They were a bad tackling team, but the 3 teams I listed were top 15 in pass yards allowed, and he got 92 yards in 3 games combined. I mean, that's the guy we're oohing and eyeing about. And to me, that's an issue. And I think that the market share conversation also can be contributed to how well the other teams, how the team is constructed. Are there any other good weapons?
But it doesn't work out that way, is my point. I mean, over the entire draft history of the NFL, that's not how it works. I mean, it might feel that way, but that's not.
Marquise Wilson had 2 1,000-yard seasons before he was 20 years old, and he was drafted when?
Sorry, who?
I feel a little bit like John Paul Hurley, and it's like a Izzy Alcafast with the British accent versus Nick Whalen.
Yeah, man.
I mean,
it's cool. I mean, you can believe what.
No, it is cool. It's great. I love it. I love it.
I've never actually been able to talk it out, so that's why my explanations are way too long-winded.
No, man. This is great, because this is what it's all about, right? Because I think, Peter, in your book, and I think we'd all agree that no matter, we can look at guys on film, we can apply things like market share, dominator rating, breakout age, whatever. We can take analytics and film, and still at the end of the day, no one has this down to a science, right? Like no one has ever come out and perfectly ranked these guys. So I think it's important to have this conversation, because there's just so many factors, right? And we just don't know at the end of the day. Analytics people don't have it perfect. Film people don't have it perfect. So that's why these conversations are so important.
Well, I mean, that comes down to injuries. That comes down to luck. That comes down to team usage. That comes down to work ethic. And no one can ever put that on there. But, I mean, to me, market share is flawed too. So is film flawed. So is everything is flawed, you know, and we can believe what we want to believe, but everything has a purpose. I mean, to me, the combine is something I don't care about, but I think everything you need to look at it with, if you're a stats guy, you're going to look at film somewhat. You're going to look at the combine somewhat. And then if one of them is super out of line, you're like, well, wait a minute, I need to go back and look at stuff. And that's kind of what I see. I don't see more testing up to those abilities or those stats. So.
No, that's.
Anyways, we can leave that one go. But anyways, I mean, I just don't see it.
No, I actually really want to talk about it. I mean, I'm still holding on to Leonte Carew and Tyler Boyd, so I want to know where the problems are in market share, because like it explodes on me all the time. It's just that it's had a better hit rate than anything else apart from Draft Fran, so I keep following it and trying to improve on it. Like, anyway.
Well, and Trey, you shared that article with us about the behavioral scientists in the NFL draft too. I think this plays a big part into when they kind of looked at what teams draft well and what teams draft poorly. And one of the quotes, and I can let you speak on, you can speak on it as well, because I only read it once, but was they talked to teams whereas they're like, okay, so if your draft board, like a whole team scouting department, like let's take a team that hasn't drafted so well. So let's take the Miami Dolphins of all teams. And they weren't in the article. They didn't mention anybody specifically, but they're like the whole scouting department, management, coach, everybody. Like if your draft board fell down or got erased, would you be able to recreate it? And the answer was distinctively no. And people got really irritated about the question about what good teams do. I think that's a good part of what we're even having with our conversation here is what teams value and what the consensus comes to. Is that's how teams end up drafting. That's how you end up having like people surprise us by quite a bit in a first round like this. Is the amount of minds that go into each NFL draft team is quite a bit. It's just so many different opinions. I don't know. I thought it was a very interesting article, and I wanted to mention it. So Trey, if you wanted to speak on that at all.
Yeah, I thought it was really one of the other things I thought that was really interesting is that a lot of teams in their scouting department, even though they have 15 guys looking at players, that they're all sharing their notes. And so, you know, they talked about, you know, guy number one looks at a player and then kind of discusses what he thinks right in front of guys 2, 3, 4, and 5 who looked at the same player. And so there's this tendency to kind of agree with what guy number one said first, instead of kind of, you know, having their 10 or 15 scouts all look at the players and get feedback independently. And you know, what it was saying was that these teams, instead of getting, you know, 6, 8, or 10 different perspectives, are really getting like 1.5, you know, that whatever kind of the common thoughts are on that particular player. And so that's why I love getting feedback from guys, you know, like Nick, guys like Matt Waldman, who all have a different process, who all do things differently. It's so interesting. And I love being able to digest from a dynasty perspective as a consumer. You know, I don't consider, I mean, we're the fantasy Joes for a reason. I don't consider, I mean, I'm a nurse, and what I do has nothing to do with football. For me, it's a hobby. And, you know, kind of like Nick says, he spends the hours and hours and hours digesting this stuff so that we don't have to. So it's fascinating to me. And I think it bears out in the NFL that, you know, you talk to 10 different NFL teams and, you know, they all have a different ranking of the quarterbacks, you know, in this year's, or the running backs or the wide receivers. And there's really, some teams have been historically a little bit better at their draft selections. And then all of a sudden they have a stinker. And then there's some teams that have been pretty poor at their draft selections, and then they'll get one right. So it's just interesting to me. There's just so many factors that go into it. The transition from college to the NFL is such a big transition. It's impossible to predict. You know, just because a guy dominated at the college level doesn't mean that he's going to do so at the NFL level, and vice versa. Just because a guy, you know, maybe he did dominate, but against inferior competition. Sometimes all it takes is that opportunity, a la Kareem Hunt last year, right? Like, so right. I think that it's just fascinating to me to have these discussions and hear different guys' perspectives and what they're looking at, taking into consideration a little bit of everybody, you know, the tape, the stats, and draft capital landing spots. It's a blast. It's great. It's great to hear you guys and just interact with you guys about these prospects. And obviously the draft night's just such a fun night for Dynasty and just football fans in general.
The one other thing with that, and one thing I struggle with because I do the Devy stuff is, I see like what Rivals rankings are, or see what these other rankings are, and that how different that is from me. And then when you look at what these NFL teams are doing, they're not constructing their teams for fantasy football purposes. That's what we're doing, and they're constructing them to win football games, and that's why people don't like a John Ross. But John Ross's purpose isn't to outproduce AJ Green; it's to add a new dynamic to their team. And I think that's the part where we have to take away, maybe the draft position or the what that role is going to be in that offense, and how that can help affect our fantasy teams and things like that. Because it's not always a 1-to-1. It's not, Rashad Penny is a better football player maybe than Geis, right? I'm not a big fan of Geis. It's Rashad Penny fits their scheme or things better than another player could.
I think that's a really good point to make about this wide receiver class as well, because everyone starts talking about these wide receivers with it's a weak class, and I get it. I understand why, because there's no Julio Jones in it. There is no Julio Jones in this wide receiver class. But there are at least 6 or 7 guys who have been incredibly successful at doing something that's not being Julio Jones, right? So in that way, it's a really strong class, like stronger than the last 3 years by far. It's just got a lot fewer players in it who could possibly, if we squint, possibly be half of what Julio Jones is, which is what the last 3 years was. I think that's the difference. These guys are really good at something that we normally aren't looking for. Like John Ross. That's what made me think of it. See, there it is
coming
again.
Back.
Jeez,
He's coming
guys,
back.
Come on.
He's coming back. Well, that was purpose. That was purposeful.
So I'd like to get you guys predictions. So I just read this tweet from Mike Clay, and it's pretty fascinating. So of the first 8 picks in the second round, right? First 8 picks of the second round, the Browns and Colts, which I'm not convinced the Browns take a running back. Everybody's saying that they might, and they might, but the Browns have 2 picks, the Colts have 2 picks, the Bucks have a pick, and the Broncos have a pick. And I think that, the Colts, Bucks, and Broncos certainly. So and with Geis, Chubb, Ronald Jones, whether you love him or not, do you think that we see a little bit of a running back run early on in the second round to start the draft tomorrow night?
I would be surprised that early. Even I'm a huge fan of Chubb. I don't see him going in the top half of the second round. I do expect Geis to go in those top 10 picks there. That's another thing. We don't know what's going on with his supposed off the field issues, and obviously there are some bigger issues than what everyone has been thinking there are. And I've kind of been with Nick a little bit, maybe not quite as much, where I do have some concerns about Geis, and for me it's more health related than maybe anything else of my concerns. But I don't see a big run going on early tomorrow.
Yeah, Trey,
there's some good talent left.
Yeah, go. I was just going to say, I think these teams have pretty big needs, and I don't know that running back is going to be among them. And we don't know with Geis with character issues. Also, with Nick Chubb, the medical. We don't really know what teams found out at the combine. So what if there are some serious issues with Nick Chubb? He could slip real late. We really have no idea. So, yeah, it will certainly be interesting, and we'll find out, right? I think it's a good question.
I just found it interesting that you have those 2 running backs go. I would have never thought that Penny and Michelle were going to go in the last 5 or 6 picks of the first round. So, that's the only thing that kind of triggered the thought for me is you've now had 3. Obviously Saquon early, but then you got 3 running backs off the board. So some of these teams that have multiple picks early and big needs, it'll be interesting. Yeah, but you're right; they do have some holes.
Do you think this is I don't know. I've heard people go both ways with it. Is this an indictment of the players? Like some people describe when players fall as or not go in the first round, as it were, that they're obviously have evaluated to be lower than what we thought they were from the outside, and other times, like Nick was just saying there, that it's more about the teams don't need them at that value. They'd rather let them fall. They still think they're that talented, but they're not as important right now. Which way do you guys go with that? Is these players not as good as we thought, or they're just not as important as we thought? Because that really goes to the heart of the question, I think.
Peter, let's ask Paul Perdichizzi, who just joined us, host of the Saturday to Sunday podcast. Paul was doing a podcast earlier, so he just joined us, and Paul, did his draft board, his predictions. So, Paul, what do you think to Peter's question about that, about these guys that have slipped?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple things. Sometimes it's some medical things that we don't know about. Other times it's just scheme and fit. I don't think it speaks too much. I think if guys come off early on day 2, that there's not that much difference between going in the 20s or going, early part of day 2. So am I surprised that Darius Geis is on the board still and, Sony Michel and Richard Penny were taken already? Yeah, I am. I'm a little bit surprised there. But if Geis comes off the board early, in day 2, I don't think it's that much of an indictment about who he is and his game. I think, every team in terms of what they're looking for is slightly different. So I don't really think that. In terms of the wide receivers, I kind of expected 2 to come off the board tonight, so I didn't really expect us to have any more. I think there's going to be a big run on wide receivers in rounds 2 and round 3. I think we could have as many as 9 or 10 taken tomorrow. So I don't think any of those guys are really that stunning that they didn't come off the board. I only thought Hayden Hurst was going to come off the board at tight end, so I think Goddard and Gesicki were more early second-round picks. And then, so I don't really think it's an indictment on the players. I just think sometimes, we may push up a little bit the offensive guys, because we follow them so closely for fantasy and we're trying to find landing spots for these guys. But I do think there's a lot of depth at the wide receiver position and some teams were holding back there and even at the running back position. But we did get 3 in round 1, which kind of speaks volumes that we continue to have a growth here in terms of teams value in the running back position again, because for a while, round 1 running backs were rare. And now all of a sudden, after year, we're getting a whole bunch in round 1s.
Also, I think it's worth noting, Paul, that I pulled up your premium content sheet about your projected top 32 players, 28 to 32 tonight. How does that feel?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of exciting. I mean, the Edmonds one and Penny really were the 2 that threw me for a loop. I mean, Michelle and Billy Price were right there on my just missed. So I wasn't surprised. I thought it was very plausible that either of those 2 could go. But Edmonds and Richard Penny were the ones that kind of surprised me. I think the guy that probably I'm most surprised is still on the board. I know we're most talking offensive skill players, but the guy who I thought was definitely going to go tonight, maybe 2 guys, was Harold Landry and then Will Hernandez. I'm surprised that both of them are on the board. James Daniels a little bit less, but once Billy Price and Frank Ragnow moved up, I wasn't going to be as surprised if Daniels was there, but I thought Hernandez and Landry were locks to go in round 1. So we'll see. It's fun following this. We'll see how many after tomorrow night out of the top 100. There's always a lot of surprises, especially in the mid to late part of round 3. But it's a fun task to kind of lay it out.
So Paul, you're a Giants fan. Who do the Giants take? After Cleveland picks in round 2, what's your prediction?
I would be stunned if the pick is not an offensive lineman. I'll give you 4 names. I mentioned James Daniels and Will Hernandez, Connor Williams, the tackle guard out of Texas, and keep an eye on it. If I was going to make a pick, I would either say it's Will Hernandez or Austin Corbett out of Nevada. I think it's going to be one of those 2 picks.
Awesome. What do you think about Saquon Barkley? We've got our Giants fan here at number 2. I can think we're thinking that maybe from a football point of view wasn't the smartest pick for the Giants. How do you feel about that as a Giants fan?
So I've been preparing myself for this for a while. Again, if it was what I would do is I would have liked them to pick a franchise quarterback, a guy who could be the heir to Eli, because we know it's the most important position. But when you really looked at these positions, there was flaws in all of these quarterbacks. I mean, I personally had Josh Rosen at number 1. I think the Cardinals got the steal of the entire first round, bar none, by moving up and barely giving up anything to get him. So I would have been happy with him. I would have been happy with Darnold. But you look at Rosen, there's the durability concerns from some of his injuries. the character. How would he play in New York? Darnold, I thought was best suited to handle New York, but the turnovers is a concern there. Also, picking a quarterback at 2, it was going to create a little bit of an awkward situation here with Eli. If the Giants got off to a slow start, people were going to want the rookie. Were they going to bench Eli after last year's the way that kind of happened? So I kind of sorted the writing on the wall that they were potentially not going to go quarterback, even though that would have been my preference. With that said, I would completely okay with the fact that they went Barkley over, say, Bradley Chubb or anybody else. I wasn't a fan of Leonard Fournette going 4 last year. I wasn't even a fan of Ezekiel Elliott going the year before. I thought Jalen Ramsey should have been the pick. But I do think Saquon Barkley is in a different level of those guys. I think he's a transcendent talent, and he, to me, is much more on the LaDainian Tomlinson, Todd Gurley from this year, Marshall Faulk, where he totally transforms an offense that the mismatches he's going to cause with Beckham being double teamed, Evan Ingram and Barkley. I'm not sure how defenses can account for all of that. So I think the immediate impact he's going to have is tremendous. Mike Clay, who does a great job doing projections, earlier in the day had put out a tweet saying that if he went to the Giants, he projected him for, I think it was approximately 1,100 rushing yards or 1,150 and like 563 receiving yards. He had 7 rushing touchdowns, 3, receiving touchdowns, and like 60 receptions. I mean, that would be a monster statistical season. And it's not even going, I don't think, completely out of unrealistic expectations. Like 1,100 yards is not a lot when you start breaking it down by games. That if he gets 1,700 yards, 10 touchdowns, I mean, that's going to be a massive impact in fantasy. And in the real world, I do think he's a guy that you can build an offense around because he's a playmaker. No one would be complaining if an elite wide receiver went. We've seen elite wide receivers like Julio Jones and other guys go in the top 10. I think people got to get away from looking at Barkley. He's not a traditional run between the tackles, 25 carries a game guy. He's an offensive weapon that could impact the game in a variety of ways and be as electric a weapon as an Odell or an Antonio Brown, or a Julio Jones. It's just that he's listed as a running back. So I do think that he could have a big impact on the team. Would I have preferred a quarterback? Yeah, but it's going to be hard to argue with the guy who most considered the best player in the draft.
He was my running back 6 or 7. I can't really remember. Just kidding. We're the Joes here, so I just put up a dartboard, and I'm not very good at darts, so kind of like a crapshoot. It's actually Akram Wadley from Iowa, RB1 from I think for fantasy reasons and for people who had the 101 who were going to take Saquon anyway, they should be a little more stoked. Like they're going into an offense that has a creative mind going into it. I do have a question thinking about the Browns and taking Baker Mayfield, and I mentioned this to the other guys at the Joes earlier in the day. So one, I don't think a lot of people expect Hugh Jackson to be back in Cleveland next year. Am I wrong in assuming this with you guys? Most likely, like overall, have you looked at all at anybody who might take his place?
The only reason I could see Hugh Jackson surviving is bringing in Todd Haley as offensive coordinator. And I think that it would be hard. Let's say that they do turn a corner like Nick was talking about earlier. Let's say that they find a way to go 7-9 or even 8-8 this year. I feel like it would be hard for them as a franchise to fire Hugh Jackson after having that kind of success. But it's funny because I thought the same thing. And when you mentioned that earlier today, I thought, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious to kind of see what these other guys have to say about it. But I thought, with all the talent they brought in and, if they do see a significant increase in their record next year, I think it may be hard for them to get rid of them. And I really do like the hiring of Todd Haley as their offensive coordinator. I think that he is got a lot of talent to work with now as well. So
it might be, I don't know. I don't do coaching so much, but it might be easier if Haley gets all the credit next year and they can just elevate him and get rid of Hugh that way. That would be my thought on it.
I mean, I don't think we never know what they're going to do. I mean, Marty Schottenheimer got fired after doing 14-2. You know what I mean? It's. Yeah. I think it's kind of up to that GM. It's kind of up to how that chemistry is too behind the scenes. But I mean, if they go 7-9, I mean, coaches have been fired for going 7-9 before. I think it's a little bit of how, part of it's record and part of it's how good are they developing players, And I think with all these young guys there, if he can't groom Mayfield, if he can't groom, I mean, like you said, there's going to be 2 of the next 3 picks are in Cleveland. And man, as Paul was saying, there's some great talent up there. I mean, I'm looking at this as a Bears fan, like, man, they better get one of these interior offensive linemen. But if you can't develop them, then I think you let them go and you find someone else that can groom them, because they have such an opportunity in Cleveland right now that I think you don't harness that because of what it's going to look like on the outside. You worry about your team in the future the most. Did you fall?
Trey, are you okay?
That's my yeah. Just my iPad fell.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, Paul, miss you, man. We haven't done this. It's been too long.
I know, absolutely. Just to jump in there, 2 names that I would keep an eye on, because I do think Hugh Jackson will be fired. I just think he will be. I'm not sure why they didn't do it already, to be frankly honest with you. 2 creative offensive minds that were getting some head coaching buzz this offseason, who I think if they have successful years could be guys that Cleveland looks to kind of bring in there and kind of build the offense there with Mayfield. One is Matt LaFleur, who worked with Sean McVay in Los Angeles and now became the offensive coordinator for Tennessee. And I think a lot of Tennessee fans are hoping that he's kind of the savior there to get that offensive, ship righted and kind of get the best out of Mariota. Really young guy, creative mind, again, working with McVay, kind of that young breed. And then also John DeFilippo, who was the quarterback coach for the Eagles and got a lot of credit for helping develop Wentz, is now the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. So I think those are 2 guys who are right now 2 of the hotter, maybe offensive coordinators, and on the younger side who might be looked at as guys who can come in and kind of really create an offense catered to the skill sets, because that's my biggest concern is I like Mayfield, the player. I really do. But I do think you got to be a little bit creative in the offense you're willing to run and kind of find ways to maximize Baker's skill set, similar to what McAvey did with Goff this year and stuff like that. So I do think there's going to be a change by next year. Like Nick was saying, they can go 8-8, and that still might not stop them if they think, that there's a better guy to come in and get them over the hump. I mean, we've seen guys get fired, for doing better than 8-8. And as much as I think they are going to improve this year, I still think 7-8 is probably where they end up. I don't know if you guys talked about it before I jumped on. Were you guys talking at all about how quickly you think Mayfield's going to take the reins? Because I think it's going to be sooner than later. I mean, that Tyrod Taylor starting the whole year thing, that's gone. That's nonsense now.
Yeah, we did talk about that, Paul. And I think consensus was that he was going to start sooner rather than later for sure.
When the last time a coach led them with the winning record, it was Pat Shurmur, right? And they made him leave.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, good luck, Hugh Jackson. You never want to see somebody leave, but it would be fun to see kind of what ends up happening there. But maybe Todd Haley totally writes that ship. It doesn't feel like Todd Haley fits the mold, Baker Mayfield fits the mold of what Todd Haley was maybe looking for. But I'm not smart enough, and I haven't been involved in the NFL enough, which would be 0, to speculate wisely on what exactly would be happening there. Maybe Todd Haley's like, I wanted Baker Mayfield, and this is my choice, and they just go out there and they crush it, and the whole offense turns around. But to me, in my history in playing really inspect the fantasy is, and I'm done trusting the Browns with anything. I'm just basically out on them.
So guys, we're getting pretty late in the night, so I'm going to do 2 things. I want to go one by one and any final thoughts or takeaways from day 1 of the NFL draft. And then we're going to do hot, bold, spicy takes for day 2. So like if I look at my screen, I got Jake first. So Jake, what's your major takeaway from day 1 of the NFL draft?
Oh boy. I honestly don't know where to start. I would probably say it was probably Josh Rosen falling a little bit and then going to the Cardinals. We talked about it. I think it's a decent landing spot. I don't know if it was the best landing spot. I think we all would have liked to see him in the Giants uniform next year or in a couple of years. But that's probably my takeaway. I'm a huge fan of Josh Rosen, and I was glad to see him eventually get picked after he slid a little bit.
Yeah, good call, Jake. Let's go to Trey Barrett, who is next on my screen.
I think for me, the biggest takeaway was the two quarterbacks that for me were my favorites from a fantasy perspective, being bookends on the first round of the draft. Baker Mayfield going to the Browns, which I'm very excited about, and talked about that earlier. And then Lamar Jackson, sneaking in to the first round there at the end by the Ravens, who now have two Heisman winning quarterbacks and Joe Flacco in the quarterback room. So I'm excited. I think Lamar Jackson, I think he has some incredible potential. I think that he's got a year to sit behind Joe Flacco. And I think is Marty Morningway the offensive coordinator there, if I remember correctly. The opportunity to sit behind Joe Flacco for a year for Lamar Jackson, I think, will be huge. I think that he can work on some of his deficiencies, and I think that from a fantasy perspective, I don't know how things will turn out for him from an NFL perspective, but with the athleticism and the running, I'm really, really excited about what he can do from a fantasy perspective as a kind of a long-term investment. So that was exciting for me to see that. Those are the two guys I'm most excited about at the quarterback position for fantasy.
So next, Nick Whalen, who is not excited about Lamar Jackson.
I think, what I like the most about this, and if we really just think about it, whether we like a player or not like a player, this is just exciting for all these young men to live that dream. You get drafted and you're in the NFL, and fan bases are excited because you got new players, and in the end, it's just excitement. I mean, this is what we enjoy, and then we'll have endless months to debate, good, bad. The draft grades after this are just trash anyway. But I think we should just kind of revel in that moment of it's exciting for them. The other thing is this is incredibly humbling, right? To show that we really don't know a lot. We don't know where they're going to pick. It could go one way, it could go another way. We had a kicker draft in the second round a couple years ago. So, I think it's a little humbling too, because everyone's so convinced who the number one pick is, and so convinced this team's not going to get this position, and we just never know. So I think it's kind of humbling for us to, be like, well, we don't really know. We're just kind of guessing at this. But I think we should just be excited overall. In terms of tomorrow, I think we really don't know what's going to go on with our fantasy rookie drafts until tomorrow happens, because I think a lot of those guys in day two were going to jump up ahead of, other guys. And something that was really interesting from JJ Zacharias was there was this study done about how what we already think, right? And we had our debate about on stats and film, but what we already think about a player is generally kind of where we already sit. So it's going to be really interesting for people to see if they really do flip players in rankings due to situations, because it's really hard for people to kind of overcome that already that bias that they already have. Because right now is Penny the 102 for some people? Yeah, lots of people are going to say no, and we'll see where Geis and Chubb and Sutton, all these guys go. So tomorrow's going to be exciting. We'll know where we're at rookie draft wise after tomorrow.
Well said, Nick. Peter Howard, what do you think? Major takeaway from day one of the NFL draft.
I don't know. As an event, I'm struck by how much my fantasy jokes and hot takes are such a facade. Because watching the Bills trade up to get Josh Allen, how quickly the jokes fade away for me about the fact that he's a terrible pick and that they shouldn't have done it, meld quickly into I really hope I'm wrong. Because Buffalo suffered just problem after problem, and Josh Allen seems like a fantastic kid. I guess I can call him a kid at this point. I'm in my 30s, who's worked really hard, probably worked harder at this game than I will work at anything in my life. And I work really hard. So all of it melts away, and I'm just, God, I hope we're all wrong, because Buffalo needs it. Buffalo fans who just live and breathe their team need it. And this kid has worked hard enough that he deserves for us to be wrong. And watching the draft, it's always how quickly the fantasy aspect of it melts away from me. I just want them all to succeed. And as for fantasy, it's got to be that DJ Moore is in fact the wide receiver 1. And if the NFL, who is a big fan of tape, says so, I think we can just accept that.
So let's go to Paul Perdichizzi, who is actually.
We're gonna have like a good silence after Peter.
What?
Yeah, we have to have like 5 or 6 seconds of silence.
You all got together and planned this.
No, we gotta go to Paul, who is actually he kind of likes Josh Allen, right, Paul? So let's go to you. You don't have to talk about Josh Allen, but that's
I mean, I'll just say one quick thing about Josh Allen. Like I've been a guy who I believed he should go top 10. I see the skill sets and the traits that make him worthy of that selection. I do think Buffalo is not an ideal landing spot because I feel like he's going to be rushed on the field because AJ McCarron is not very good and they don't have many skill players at the wide receiver position and their O-line is terrible. So I don't think it was an ideal landing spot, and I think Buffalo is really going to have to resist getting him on the field too soon, but I do think he was worth of a top 10 pick. In terms of other big thing that stood out for me is I really love the Calvin Ridley landing spot. I think some people aren't because they want every guy to go to a spot where he's the ideal number 1. But I think in reality, he's not a number 1. I don't think there's a number 1 in this draft class, to be honest with you. I think Courtland Sutton's the only one that even has the capabilities, if he pans out, to be a true number 1. If you are looking for a guy like, in the mold of a Mike Evans or somebody like that. But what I do think Calvin Ridley is, I think he's the best route runner in this draft class. I think his floor, I think, is Stephon Diggs. And now I think he goes in a landing spot where Julio Jones is going to dominate the defensive attention. He's going to be the guy that gets the number 1 defensive back on him. He's going to be the guy that throws double teams. He's going to be the guy that defensive coordinators scheme game plans around, which means Ridley is going to be matched up with second or third corners. He's not going to be the focus of attention. And I think he could have, I think this year, I would say, feel extremely confident that Calvin Ridley outperforms DJ Moore, who I question his fantasy upside, to be honest with you, in Carolina's offense, because they wrote 75 passes to Christian McCaffrey. Greg Olsen catches 60 to 70 passes. Devin Funchess is not going to go away. And they're not this prolific offense that really could sustain, 4 viable, offensive pass catchers. So I like DJ Moore. I mean, maybe he has the upside, but I think Calvin Ridley is going to outproduce him this year. And I like the landing spot for Calvin Ridley a lot. And I think a lot of people maybe are a little bit down on it, but I think it's a perfect landing spot for him. And I think he's going to be, I think, immediately produce more than maybe any other wide receiver, even ones that go tomorrow.
All right. Wow. So you just said floor for Calvin Ridley is Stephon Diggs, Paul, right?
Yes.
All right.
Interesting. One thing I thought of, Paul, with that, though, I just came to me is this is a little interesting when you compare Roddy White's end of his career. They bring in a Julio, which kind of helped, I think, Roddy stay at that level because less attention, and Ridley could do that for Julio.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they lost Gabriel, which was that guy who could stretch the field vertically also. And Ridley obviously has that in his, basket of tools there. I mean, I think he ran like a 4.42 at the combine. I just think Ridley's being very undervalued because Alabama had horrendous quarterback play, honestly. Like, I think if he played in Maryland, I think Calvin Ridley's stats would have been better or the same as DJ Moore. Or if he played anywhere where there was a competent quarterback play and was the focal point of the offense. He just wasn't the focal point of the Alabama offense. It was all about the run game and play good defense, and they didn't play in shootouts. And again, I know I'm on an island. I don't care about the age thing at all. I know I'm a little bit on a fantasy island on that one. Like, that's why Hayden Hurst was my number 1 tight end, because I didn't care about the 25. I just don't. I'm not worried about 8 years down the line. The only thing I worry about 6 to 8 years, and anything after that is gravy. Besides maybe at the quarterback position. So I don't worry that Calvin Ridley is 23 years old. I just don't.
Can I know you're trying to get out here, and I keep interrupting people because I'm excited to talk to people.
No, Peter, there's no rush. No, because I want to get to like some bold predictions for day 2. So no, we're good. Poor Trey Barrett is dying on the other end. He managed.
I mean, you're just putting off me on the field. I'm pretty sure I'm the last picture on Ryan's computer, so it's
yeah.
No, Peter, go ahead, man. Yeah, go ahead about
this. I gotta disagree a little bit on Ridley. For a start, I can't speak for everyone, but the age problem with Ridley isn't that he's 23. Some people do judge it by the age people enter into the NFL season, which is slightly predictive as well. But that's not my problem at all with Ridley. I don't have a problem with this guy, obviously. That sounds wrong. But it's the fact that there's this big black hole in his profile and that he didn't play at age 18, 19, or 20, right? Did he play at 20? And those are the most important years as far as evaluating what he can do when he doesn't have the advantage of his of being more mature, having more time and more experience. That's why I think breakout age and the age at which you have production is predictive. And this isn't me. This is like everything I do is an extension. I should have mentioned this a long time ago of like Frank DuPont and also Sean Siegel, and then also John Moore, all working on RotoViz, have done a lot more work on this, and I'm just piggybacking on really smart people's ideas here, you understand? But so that's the problem for me, Ridley's problem. It's not that he's 23, it's that there's this big black hole. He did well at age 20, 21, and 22, when really he should do well in college as a fairly talented wide receiver that was recruited into a good, Bunny Rabbit is quotes. And as far as his production goes, his production's fantastic at the ages that he played. I don't think anyone, maybe they do, but from my point, my problem with him isn't that he had low production. He had a fantastically high production. He had 29% of the team's receptions in his first year and 30% of the team's yards. Now, it's when I read into that, one, that big black hole, and that I don't know how good he is without the advantage of his age and experience, and then the fact that he's producing barely more yards than he's getting receptions. He's producing basically what is being given from a market share perspective. And then in his second year, he's outproduced by Darius Stewart, who, just entered the NFL and took it on by storm because he's such a fantastic wide receiver. And he did better in his last year than Calvin Ridley when they're on the field. And he was given 24% of the receptions, and he couldn't outperform Stewart in yards or touchdowns for that matter. And then Stewart leaves, and there's no other wide receiver on the field that catches more than 300 yards. There's literally no competition, and he still barely outperforms the receptions he gets in terms of yards. And I know that, he's doing fantastic things on the field. And there are successful wide receivers. AJ Green is a great example of wide receivers that don't produce till they're 20 and then do fantastic in the NFL. It's not that he doesn't have good production. It's not that he's old. It's that the thing that is most indicative of whether he's actually more capable or less capable of an average successful NFL receiver is just missing from his profile. And the production he did have, while above average, there's big questions in it. There's like no competition, can still barely break over his receptions. And I think I already said all of that. So it's not that he's old, it's that we don't know what he is when he's not old.
Well, so one of the things we've talked about a little bit in the past and trying to look into it, and Ryan, I'm gonna try to reference that article as best I possibly can, is Ridley just had a really tough childhood. So he came to Alabama as a true freshman. He was turning 20. He had to sit out part of his senior year of high school as far as playing football, but he went 3 years in college. So the way the NFL works and the way it's kind of like one of the things that it's a really messed up system, because the way that Calvin Ridley's life went, he couldn't enter college any sooner than he did, and he entered it as older. And the way the NFL works is he had to stay in college for 3 years. So his breakout age in college, I get that he couldn't do it any faster than what he did. Like, he literally couldn't have gone as a recruit to a school any faster than whatever, the whole way it goes. And I get that it's kind of unprecedented. But he's not a redshirt junior. He's not a medical redshirt. He's not a transfer.
It's not unprecedented is the thing. I mean, it happens, and it normally doesn't work out well.
There's never been a first round wide receiver pick that's had to sit out part of his senior year of high school.
AJ Green's first year was when he was 20. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong about that, but from memory, I think he was one of the examples that came up when I was looking at it. And again, I'm not laying out on his feet. He hasn't done anything wrong. When he was on the field, he did really well. That's the thing. He did well. It's just we don't know what he is before that through no fault of his own. And the way I go with this is I don't know what story explains that away in a way that I can't care about it, because there are other receivers and all of them have either had tough childhoods or fantastic childhoods and got an injury, or I don't want to say this guy's story exempts him from it, because that's, to me, that's an insult to all the other wide receivers who didn't make it, as if their story wasn't good enough to explain away the fact that they didn't. I mean, I'm not laying it on them. He did everything he could possibly do in college, and that's how I wrote him up. I said his profile's good. It's just got this big black hole, like you say, where we don't know. Sorry.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to a good part of it. But like Sony Michel is only 2 months younger than, or like 1.5, 2 months younger than Calvin Ridley. Nobody's talked about that the entire time. And he, uses recruitment to high school to get his parents jobs and things like that. It's just these athletes that are grow up in different lifestyles, and they get recruited by these prep schools for high school. It's so big in the States now, where I guess at the end of the day is where I'm going with this, is saying Ridley he could only progress his high school education and the way he lived as fast as he possibly could until going to college, and he didn't take a year off to do anything else.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? So my question, breakout age is my question. My thing, and I've thought about this. And I would love to do the research on it, but it's breakout year. Is it true freshman? Is it redshirt freshman? Is it true sophomore year? Versus age when you're coming into a school. Is it your first year there? Is it your second year there? I don't know. It's always just a curiosity to me, because that would factor a little bit of where you came from.
Right. I've tried it by like you're saying, doing it by the year, by freshman, sophomore, redshirt freshman, and it's just not as it doesn't predict as well. It's not as valuable, and by age is far more useful. And I think that's because no matter what you call a person, they are at a certain level of literally physical development at certain ages, much more than they are than the title that's put on the year. That's my story for why it works better.
Hey, well, I'm sorry, Peter. We gotta move it along. Well, so give us your takeaway from night one.
Oh yeah, one, waiting for draft picks is extremely boring. I think it's oh hey, the pick's coming in. Let me wait 5 more minutes for the draft pick to actually be announced on TV. Because I came back home at pick 10, and just to wait through all that, I love the draft and what it means and how in analyzing it for fantasy. But in general, the first round, it's a lot of it's kind of a snooze fest in between. But it is fun to have something to talk about again with fantasy football. Number 2 is I realized that I just don't, as much as I've looked at players and done analysis on anybody else that is not fantasy relevant, it's just how little I know about what people are actually going to do. And you can kind of guess a little bit, but it was a really fun first round. But if I would have been betting, $20,000, you had to one way or the other, was Rashad Penny going to go in the first round? My answer would be 100% no. And I don't know. It's just always, I don't know. It's such a great perspective on just how wrong we are all the time in trying to guess these picks. And it's still fun though. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it quite a bit, except for the waiting in between.
Fair enough. So my takeaway from the first round. So I joined my first IDP league, guys. So the Joes know about this, and I don't know anything about IDP. So I've been DMing Tom Kislingberry, who does the Read and React podcast, one of the co-hosts of that podcast, and I asked him about Roquan Smith because I'm a Bears fan, as is Nick Whalen, and I said, so where does Roquan Smith go in rookie drafts? And he says, he might be 90% of those drafts, one of the top picks in rookie drafts, because linebackers, go high in IDP leagues. So that's my takeaway. Roquan Smith, IDP players, your number 1 rookie pick. Go get him. All right, so
shocking the Bears defensive player.
Yeah, well, hey, it's a takeaway. It's let's appeal to the IDP listeners, the two that we have out there. So let's do our bold, hot, bold, spicy picks for round 2. So loyal listeners will know that during the season we do hot, bold, spicy takes, right? So there are 5 levels, guys. 5 levels. There's banana pepper, there's jalapeno, habanero, ghost pepper, and the almighty Carolina Reaper. So we're going to start with Jake. Jake Anderson, what's your hot, bold, spicy take for day 2 of the NFL draft?
Oh, man, it's late. I have to get up early in the morning. I'm probably going to stick to like a banana pepper level so I don't get any indigestion. My prediction for tomorrow is and I'm more excited about it now, but I have this feeling that Arizona is going to take Christian Kirk tomorrow. He's from Arizona. I love to see him learn from Larry Fitz before he retires and hangs him up. And now, especially with my quarterback 1 there, I think that'd be a nice marriage for him. So that's my hot take. I got to get out of here, guys. Thanks for having me on. Great to see you guys. Great chatting with you guys. Always love learning from all you guys. So we'll have to do it again sometime.
Thanks for hopping on, Jake.
Thanks, Jake.
Right,
we appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a good night, guys.
Yeah, you too. So Trey Barrett, who's about to drop off. Trey, what's your hot, bold, spicy take for day 2 of the NFL draft?
So this probably is, like Jake, probably not, incredibly spicy. But I think that Nick Chubb is going to be selected before Darius Geis. I think the Darius Geis slide continues, and I think that Nick Chubb comes off the board within the first six picks of the second round. I think that he's going to go early. I'm a big fan, and I think that he comes off the board early second round.
First 6 picks would be Browns, Giants, Browns, Colts, Buccaneers. I could see it happening.
Yeah, a lot of running back needy teams there.
I would love to see him go to the Colts. That would make me so happy. He would probably become my 102 then.
All right. So that's a banana pepper take for Trey. Maybe even a milk take for Trey Barrett.
Milk.
No, that's
respectful milk take.
So Trey may drop off because I think he's got to work tomorrow. So we'll let you go, Trey, if you need to.
No, I'm good.
Trey's gonna persevere. So Nick Whalen, what's your hot, bold, spicy take for day 2 of the NFL draft?
Actually, I agree with some of that. I agree that Geis is going to fall, and I think Chubb actually does go to the Colts. I would say a mild take would be Rojo going to the Buccaneers before Geis. But in my dream world, you guys can shake me. I would love to see Sutton get paired up with Andrew Luck, and Andrew Luck comes back, and it's just glorious. So that's my dream scenario. Or he goes to Chicago, and then I can cheer for him all the time. Be sweet.
Sutton's going 204 or 205.
Yeah, and then he's going to be my 102, and just because I like to.
That would be crazy if he went to Chicago. I mean, they need like interior linemen, as you pointed out earlier. But yeah, I'd be pretty thrilled if he went to Chicago.
Quick tangent, Nick. How concerned are you about Luck? As far as I've never, in some brief looking back, I don't think I've ever seen a narrative that's been like Luck's. And I honestly, he hasn't thrown a football in a year, right? How safe is that?
Year, man.
I know, but I don't have a GoPro on him, seeing whether or not he's throwing. So that's where it's going to come from.
Maybe you should. Maybe that's
the answer.
If Luck had agreed with a GoPro on him, he'd be throwing way more footballs, way more accurately. That's all I gotta say.
I mean, honestly, though, it's concerning. You want to think about big-time quarterbacks with injuries. Chad Pennington came back from a shoulder injury twice, but he didn't wait this long. And Peyton Manning had the spine, but he still came back earlier than Luck did. I'm concerned. My only share I just sold of him in a league, and I got a pretty solid price back. But I got out, and I loved Andrew Luck coming out. But honestly, this is just not a great scenario right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty terrified. I want to, because I bought a couple T.Y. Hilton chairs this offseason, just because he's just so cheap, and he's still, I feel like, an elite wide receiver. But even if Brissett is there, at least Brissett has another year with them. We can make more than one read. But yeah, I'm terrified about Luck's future anyway. Okay.
I think their draft picks maybe made me feel a little better. I mean, they bought someone to protect Luck and didn't go for any of the quarterbacks. I mean, that made me feel a little better. The guy I normally follow for injury news is Jeremy Funk. He's a DLF writer. He's actually a doctor, and he's a Colts fan. And what he says is he thinks he's going to be okay based on their moves. And again, in the draft, it seemed to back it up a little bit, at least. I'm still nervous, but looking for any ray of light I can find.
Yeah. Well, what did he say last year at this time? In all
I got
honesty?
off, guys. I'll see you guys.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
Yep, see you, boys.
Right.
But like Peter, like maybe like, or like just before the preseason, did you think he was going to come back last year too?
I don't know. I actually wasn't writing for DLF or talking to Jeremy at that point.
I'm just curious.
But I'm going to say no because I hope he's always right.
What's it? Yeah, it's like because I feel like there's a lot of opinions that he's come back at some point next year, and then he just was out anyway. Okay.
Yeah, that whole thing was weird. Just constantly next week, right?
Yeah,
it's gonna be back next week, anytime now. That I drafted him in my a hometown redraft league, and that killed me every week.
So it's getting late. I want to make sure our guests can jump off. Who wants to jump in next? Paul, Peter, who wants to go next with their hot, bold, spicy take of day 2?
Sure, I'll jump in. I do think tomorrow we're going to see 9 wide receivers go on day 2. So I think,
nice.
So I think this, like Nick was saying before about tomorrow, really set the stage for our rookie drafts. I think he's 100% spot on. I'm expecting 9 tomorrow. Cortland Sutton, DJ Chark, Christian Kirk, James Washington, Anthony Miller, Michael Gallup, Deion Kane, Dante Pettis, and Equinemius St. Brown with an outside chance at 10 in Deshaun Hamilton. So I think 9 or 10 wide receivers come off the board. And because 3 running backs went tonight, I'm going to go out on a limb and say my guy, Kalen Ballage, is a top 100 pick and goes off the board before the end of tomorrow.
So if you're listening to this on double speed, if you listen to the podcast, you need to slow it down because Paul just flew through those wide receivers. But no, that's awesome. I love it. I love it. Yeah, because we were talking about this before, doing these drafter parties. Day 2 is really going to be where it's at in terms of most dynasty leagues, just to see where a lot of these skill position players go, because we didn't have very many tonight. But yeah, day 2 is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right, Peter, what about you? What's your hot, bold, spicy take of day 2?
I have more questions, so you're going to have to stick around for about an hour, actually. No, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I'm really enjoying it. Sorry,
we're good. We're good. I don't know how
as long as you can long silences.
Will and I can go till like 3 a.m. I don't know how Paul's doing, but we're good.
What I want to say is that Paul missed one, and that Traquan Smith is going to get drafted by something ridiculous like the Seahawks or Green Bay. But I don't think I'm going to get that. I think he's going to go in hopefully the 3rd round. I think Paul's right. I also think he's right. We're going to get more wide receivers. Actually, I don't know if he meant this, but not just a lot of wide receivers, but more wide receivers than running backs are going to go off in round 2. And I guess the only way I can make that spicy is to come up with a prediction. So I guess James Washington will go to Green Bay. Is that definite enough to be spicy?
Yes.
Okay. All right. There you go.
It's like it's like a jalapeno.
That's not bad. That's not bad. All right. Well, quickly let's wrap up here. What's your hot, bold, spicy take of day 2?
Oh man, so much going on with day 2. And I was looking at the picks earlier. So my hot, bold, spicy take will be in the first 4 picks. Somebody will trade up and take Mason Rudolph.
All right. So here's my hot, bold, spicy take. I'm going to stick with my guy throughout this whole process, Kyle Lauletta. Kyle Lauletta will be drafted in day 2. That's my hot, bold, spicy take. Might even be a Carolina Reaper.
I don't know.
I guess it's kind of crazy.
The Patriots are probably taken.
Yeah.
The fact that they took Sony Michel is so weird. Why are we not talking about how weird this is that the Patriots took a running back in round 1 after years after
it's strange.
Roney was last one.
Sony Michel.
We really didn't talk about that much. We should talk about that. Paul, you didn't talk about that. What are your thoughts on Sonny Michel before we get out of here?
I mean, I was definitely surprised, as one of you guys just said, in terms of the Patriots, they don't usually just put a premium on running backs. So it tells me a couple things. It tells me, one, I don't think the injury stuff that was being talked about, guys, about Michel today is that significant, because I just don't think the Patriots would invest a first-round pick on a guy who they think might have an injury issue. So I think that's the first thing it says. The second thing I think it says is that they do look at him as a guy who could be a focal point of the offense. I don't think they're just taking him to have him as a 10-touch guy, because if that was the case, I think they would wait. Like, I don't think they see the value. So I think he's going to be a guy, like, right now for me, it's not even close. I would take him over Rashard Penny by leaps and bounds in terms of dynasty rookie drafts. Now, I know right now only 3 running backs have been taken, but Rashard Penny's going into a situation where it's one of the worst offensive lines in football. They have absolutely no playmakers on the outside that stretch the defenses, and Rashard Penny can't pass protect, which means he's rarely going to be on the field on third downs, and he's not going to impact the passing game and pick up those receiving stuff. So he's going to be squarely a early down runner behind a terrible offensive line that hasn't put out a productive running game in years since the last time Marshawn Lynch did it. Sonny Michel on the other side, I think the only running backs that are going to be active on game day are going to be Sonny Michel, Rex Burkhead, and James White. I guess is an outside possibility. Brandon Bolden sticks around because he's a good on special teams, but obviously that has no impact on the actual offensive side of the ball. Michel's going to be the guy that plays near the goal line. So he might not be that prototypical big back like a Gillisley or somebody like that, but I think Sonny Michel is going to be a guy who is their early down runner, and he's going to be their goal line guy. Now, I don't think we're going to see Michel impact the passing game all that much, because I think they'll specialize there with James White, and then they'll use Rex Burkhead a little bit in a variety of ways. And I do think they'll all be on the field and play a lot at times. But I do think Michel's a guy who I would say he's probably going to see 14 or 15 touches. And if he sees 14 or 15 touches a game and he's getting the ball near the goal line, I think he's going to be a pretty productive fantasy asset, because I think in that offense, he would have a legitimate shot between 7 and 11 touchdowns, because they're not going to hand the ball to James White inside the 5. And, Burkhead could do it a little bit, but I think they look at Michel as a guy who could be their focal point of the running game, and then use White and Burkhead in a variety of roles, mostly like change of pace and pass catching roles. So I'm surprised by it. It's very unpatriot-like, but I do think the fantasy ramifications could be plentiful, and I think it could be a guy that's intriguing. And if Geis doesn't land in an ideal spot, I think Michel could push his way to potentially to be the 1.02 pick. I do think Chubb and Geis's landing spots could impact that a little bit, but I do think Michel is in the mix, because I do think he'll have that touchdown upside in New England.
Yeah, and you're sitting there. If they're sitting there at 31, they had no shortage of suitors to trade back up just to get in that first round. So they can have like other teams have that availability for that 5th year extension. So it's not like taking Sonny Michel for them was a cheap cost. I feel and I'm just super shocked by it. Just I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure Baltimore called them and offered the same trade they did to Philadelphia, and that's a typical New England move. And they could have went back to 52. I think that's where the Ravens were coming from. And at 52, there's going to be good running backs on the board. I mean, Ronald Jones might still be there. Kerryon Johnson's probably definitely going to be there. So there's going to be other good running backs that they could have got there, or they could have waited a little further and took a guy like Royce Freeman to be their early down runner and paired him with Rex Burkhead. I thought it was going to be more a guy like that than a guy early in the draft. So it definitely was surprising. But to me, is Belichick has a clear plan for everything he does. And I think that should tell us that he's going to be a fantasy asset, because he's going to be a bigger part of that offense than we think. They didn't just waste the 31st pick in the first round on a guy who's going to play like 12, who's going to get like 10 to 12 touches, and just be a part of a small committee, just be a part of like a committee. I think he's going to be a bigger part than maybe we're used to seeing a Patriots running back be.
Yeah, and first round picks are expensive. It's like, especially with the running back position, that's the actual like dollar cost of the team. Anyway,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's weird though. Even when the scenario you've laid out there to pick Sony Michel for 14, 15 touches, he's going to need more than that for me to value him that high anyway. But I'm wondering if they got tired of carrying so many. I mean, it was a really good, versatile idea, but then they got hit with injuries and they had to play with the IR a little more than they usually do. And I'm wondering if they want to clear out the depth chart a little bit, and that's why they invested. And even then, Sony... I'm not going to question the Patriots, right? But Bill Belichick, he's a weird choice, especially if you want a goal line guy. I mean, he's got like
if you want to wake up tomorrow morning, you don't question the Patriots.
Yeah, exactly. He's got the least body of work as the hammer, right? I mean, he didn't have a workhorse load. He was more involved in the passing game than most of the other backs in that range. I mean, Geis and Chubb are both more renowned as better hammers or better between. I mean, it just seems even in that scenario, Michel was a weird choice. I don't know what to call them, Sony or Michel. Both sound weird when I use them individually. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think Geis or Chubb would have been a little bit more ideal in terms of, you know, what they were looking for to complement Burkhead and James White. So I agree 100% with that. With that said, I think we saw last year as the year went on, when they basically just put Gillislee on the bench, that they still had a pretty productive running game with Dion Lewis, you know, Burkhead and James White. So I guess they're viewing, I mean, Dion Lewis was a pretty big fantasy impact down the stretch last year, and probably was, again, I would have to look it up, but my guess is he was probably in that 14 to 16 touch, you know, world, just guessing off the top of my head. Yeah. I guess that's what they're viewing Michel to come in and be, like, very similar to the role that Dion Lewis had. I don't think
a little more than
I don't think he's gonna have a huge impact in the passing game, because they do have those specialized roles for Burkhead and for James White. So it's just weird that they look to replace, you know, Dion Lewis with a first round pick. So I do agree that it is strange.
Yeah, but I think Sony Michel graded out as one of the top pass blockers, right? Like as far as everything goes.
Yeah, I think he's definitely someone that all these college guys, a lot of them, you know, very few of them, you know, check off that box well, just because they're just not asked to do it much in college. But I do think off the top of my head that he was at least, you know, serviceable. But I don't even think he's going to be asked to do that much, because probably he'll, you know, when he's in the on the field, he'll probably be getting he'll be getting carries, and then when it's a passing play, a lot of times they'll probably bring in Burkhead, who's a really good pass protector, or James White. So it's unique. It's interesting. The landing spots of these day two running backs will really dictate the top 5, top 6 running back boards, I think, for dynasty leagues, because it can go so many ways depending on where Jones and Chubb and Geis and you know, Kerryon Johnson land. And then I guess even you could throw Royce Freeman in there a little bit, but he's a little bit down for me. And then I know John Kelly, I'm a fan of him. I don't think he's going tomorrow, though, to be honest with you. I think he's going to be there for the beginning of round 4. You know, it'll be interesting to see how these guys come off and who lands in ideal landing spots, because there are some ideal landing spots. You guys have mentioned the Colts, Tampa Bay, the Lions, that they went out and got a really good offensive lineman tonight who's going to kind of stabilize the interior there and is a physical guy who really helps the run game. So I think right there, the Lions, and then what we just said, the Colts and the Bucks, whoever, if they get running backs tomorrow, they're going to be in really good landing spots. And obviously Penny's going to have a chance to be the starter in Seattle. And I think Michel's going to be the clear starter for whatever that's worth in New England. So a lot of these guys may end up in good landing spots if they go to the teams that are in most need of running back. So it's going to be fun. I think the wide receivers is going to be most fascinating, because those 10 or so that I talked about potentially going tomorrow, I don't think there's any clear-cut order. I think landing spot and depth charts is going to dramatically impact the way they fold in rookie drafts.
Especially where it's going.
You think based on this landing spot, Michel is going to outscore Barkley year 1 right now?
No, not even close. I think Mike Clay. I think when you really stop and think about it, I don't think those projections were that far off, because, like, you know, when you really think about the impact that Barkley is going to make, obviously he's going to have, you know, a ton of touches, you know, in the running game and then also in the receiving game. But I think sometimes people, you know, forget, like, 1,100 yards rushing is 68 yards a game. I'd be surprised if Barkley doesn't average 68 yards rushing a game. I think the Giants are going to make a more concerted effort. They signed Nate Solder. I'm expecting a lineman to start tomorrow. I even think they could double dip and get another one in round 3 as well. So I think they're going to try to solidify that line. That I do think 1,100 is a safe estimate for Barkley's rushing yards. And then receiving, I think he's definitely going to impact in that regards. And if you play in PPR, I don't see how he doesn't catch 50 passes. And, touchdowns is always a fluky stat. It's very hard to project from year to year. Maybe it's 6, but maybe it's 10 or 12. But even if it's 6, I still think he's clear and away the number 1 running back, in terms of fantasy next year. But again, one of these guys could go in the perfect spot tomorrow, and then maybe there this year's Kareem Hunt. So I don't think it's crazy to think that, somebody outproduces Barkley in terms of fantasy points next year. I just don't think it's going to be Michel. I just don't think he'll get enough usage to really push the envelope unless he has one of those LeGarrette Blount where LeGarrette Blount fell in the end zone 18 times. Sure, then maybe I can see Sony Michel. Any running back that would score that many times obviously would be near the top of the ranking board. But I have a hard time seeing Michel outscoring Barkley.
Sorry, I keep cutting in here.
No, Peter, you're good. You're good. Don't worry about it, man.
I've been doing projections for the Roto Underworld draft guide, which is meant to be coming out. I guess I'm meant to be working on that now. The draft started, actually. But the projections, obviously, Mike Clay's the best in the business at it. So, yeah, they're incredibly reasonable, even assuming average efficiency. I can tell you that. What I'm wondering about, I can't wait to go see what Mike did, was Mike, as if he's my friend, Mr. Mike Clay.
Call him Mikey.
Right, good old Mike. Good old Mikey. I'm wondering where he got the targets from, because normally when you do an expected pass to run ratio, and you can change that a little bit now they've drafted Barkley, you assume they're going to run more than when they had no one. But like those targets, are we going to, take them from Ingram? We're going to take them from Shepard? I'm wondering where he affected the passing game, because you're right, 50 catches is more than reasonable for a back like Barkley if he does half of what he's capable of. So I'm wondering who are meant to be cutting from our rosters, whether it's Sterling Shepard or Evan Ingram.
Yeah, I think Ingram's definitely in for I think as much as I love Ingram, the talent, I think he's explosive and really creates mismatches. Yeah. I think he was always in for a little bit of a regression this year in terms of total target shares with Beckham back. This is definitely going to hurt as well. Shepard, when he was healthy last year, had a lot of targets. He's going to have to lose targets too, I think. Obviously Beckham's going to get his, that's
28% easy.
Yeah, that's 100, 120, 130, 100, whatever it is. Barkley's probably, Beckham's going to get that, and then everything's going to revolve around from there. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Whatever people might think about that pick, they're definitely going to keep some defensive coordinators up at night the night before the week of games, trying to come up with a game plan of how you stop Beckham, Barkley, Ingram, and Shepard. Shepard is like a forgotten guy, but he's a really good route runner. Like, that was his calling card in college. He had a really productive year one. Last year when he was healthy and was the focal point of the offense, he had some really good games as well. And he's going to be a forgotten guy being matched up on, who knows who he's going to be matched up on, because they might have to use their slot corners or whoever to, match up with Barkley if he's out lined up, or Ingram. So, it's going to be a pick your poison type thing, that if the O-line could just hold up, I don't know how the Giants don't have a really explosive offense next year. Even if Eli is regressing and is average to slightly above, that might be good enough to put up really good productive stats. So it's going to be fun. As a Giant fan, it'll be interesting to see. So I'm looking forward to it.
So Paul, is there a buy or sell on the Giants roster? Is Evan Ingram, dare we say it, is he a sell?
No, I don't think it's a sell, because I do think he, at the tight end position, I still think he's a guy who, I don't think we could expect him now to maybe make a leap up to that Ertz, Gronk, Kelsey territory, but I do think he's still comfortably in that next 3 or 4 guys, because even those guys, there's going to be some question marks. Like, I know I'm uncertain with how much production DJ Moore gets this year, but Greg Olson's going to lose some touches too, and some target opportunities because DJ Moore is obviously significantly better than anybody else that they were playing last year, lining up outside as a wide receiver, so Greg Olson's stats are going to come down a little bit. Hunter Henry, I know everyone loves Hunter Henry, but they have a lot of mouths to feed there too. If Mike Williams, shows anything this year, they still have Keenan Allen, so so I don't think Hunter Henry is dramatically better than Evan Ingram, so I still do think, Evan Ingram's going to live in that world of, tight end 4 to tight end 8 or 9. I think those guys there's always a razor thin, margin between those guys anyway. And so much of it is who scores the touchdown. So I do think Evan Ingram will still have a pretty good opportunity to be a significant red zone weapon. Because to be honest with you, if they don't sign another wide receiver of significance, they don't really have a third wide receiver. So I think they might be a lot of times where they go with 2 tight ends and really Evan Ingram is just a slot wide receiver or even an outside wide receiver who I think some people think he could do that. I mean, I know we're watching the draft tonight, but it was just 365 days ago that Mike Mayock said he reminded him of, Mike Evans in terms of his body type and his style of play. Like, I know that's not what the Giants use him as. They use him as more of that move tight end, but I do think Evan Ingram has the capabilities to play a little bit outside wide receiver, or if Shepard's out there, line him up in the slot and then have Ellison as the blocking tight end. I think you might see a lot of that because, Roger Lewis, like that. I mean, Cody Latimer, like those guys aren't really going to see many, opportunities in the passing game. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, if for some reason they get Des Bryant on the cheap, I have absolutely no idea how to figure out who's getting targets in that offense. But I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting the Giants' offense last year was anemic at best, and so those guys, people are going to score more touchdowns. That's just the way it's going to go. They put up 246 just scoreboard points in general. Like not even like diving into and looking at how much those were just offensive, but like the Giants are going to they're not going to put up 246 next year. There's going to be a good regression back to the mean for them, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's massive. Yeah,
I mean, so, if you really stop and think about it, like they played almost the entire year without Odell Beckham and literally no efficient running game. Like so. Eli Manning is not going to know what to do. Last year, he was thrown to nobodies and had nobody in the backfield. And now this year, if Odell Beckham and Saquon Barkley are healthy, like you are literally adding 2 of arguably could become sooner rather than later. If you had Barkley in the mix, the 2 of the more explosive playmakers in all of football. If Barkley reaches what people think he could be, like that, it's going to be night and day. I mean, I think the Giants are again because they chose this route to go for now. I think their win percentage. I mean, they're not winning 3 games next year if those guys stay healthy. I mean, I think they'll be back in like the 7 to 9 range, and if the bounce of the ball goes their way, maybe they win 10 or 11 games. I mean, there's such a small difference between winning 8 games and 11 games. It's really amazing when you really stop and think about it. But I think they're much more in that 7 to 9 range anymore than like 3 or 4 where they were last year.
Yeah, they threw for 20 touchdowns and ran for 6. It's horrible.
Yeah, like I think you have to be careful separating out a massive regression back to the mean would be average, right? If Beckham does what he's going to do and Barkley does half of what we think he's going to do, that would be a massive regression back to the mean. To start adding in Shepard and Ingram, you're jumping a big shark. Right?
Yeah.
Eli Manning's mean when he was an elite quarterback wasn't supporting 2 top 24 fantasy athletes in the receiving game. So the idea that he would do more than 1 next year when his mean is significantly lower than he used to, even if he's not washed, even if it's just a little lower, I think Beckham's going to be fantastic and Barkley's going to be fantastic, but I would find it really hard to add in anyone else to a fantasy level of significance after that, right? You're talking
Eli Manning, all those touchdowns.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Eli's going to be an interesting like quarterback too, in like a super flex league, or a guy like if you're one of those last people to get your starters and like in redraft leagues, like like you draft somebody like I don't know, Phillip Rivers, like, and then you draft like Eli as a backup and you like play some matchups because Eli's obviously going to have some good weeks. Like, I can't see a scenario where he doesn't have some spike weeks. Now, maybe it might be against bad defenses and you play the matchups a little bit, but there's going to be some weeks that Odell goes off for $150 and 2 touchdowns, and, and Barkley, and Barkley makes a big play, and maybe it's in the passing game. Like, so there's going to be some weeks, like, as someone that loves DraftKings, like, I feel like Eli is going to be like a dirt cheap quarterback that is definitely going to get some play until maybe DraftKings comes around, and if he starts having those weeks, obviously they start changing the salary significantly. But it'll be fun to try to pick and choose those games, and really their defense really could impact a lot. If their defense is shaky again, that could put them into some shootouts. So it'll be fun, I think, from fantasy anyway.
Well, if Alex Smith can become a deep passing quarterback, I think Eli Manning can probably do that for you.
Yeah, I think Eli can get back to that.
All right, guys. With that, we should probably end this bad boy. It is 1:45 East Coast time for podcast listeners who listen to this on Friday morning. So let's get out of here. We will do this again day 2, the drafter party. I don't know, Paul, Peter, you guys going to join us tomorrow night? If not, we understand. But can you come back?
If I can pop on again, I'll be recording Saturday, Sunday, right after round 3 ends. But if you guys are going as long as tonight, I might have it. I might have an opportunity. And if I'm still functioning, because I feel like I'm not going to go to bed until like 4 a.m. because I'm too wide awake. I feel like I got to catch up on the last 2 hours of Twitter. Like,
no kidding, right?
Yeah. So like I feel like by the time tomorrow rolls around, and I won't sleep much because once it gets laid out, my dog will wake me up, and that'll be the morning. So that'll like I'll sleep like 2 hours tonight. So we'll see how I'm going like tomorrow night at like 1 a.m. after I finish the podcast, or 12 o'clock. But yeah, if I can, I would definitely jump back on. Definitely a blast hanging out with all you guys.
We appreciate it, Paul.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
And Peter, hopefully you can join us tomorrow night as well. We'll see how we're doing.
I'm actually meant to be on the Dynasty Dummies one, but again,
that's right.
Like Paul says, if I'm welcome back after all that lathering I did, then by all means, I'll try and jump back on when I'm finished.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I think the Dynasty Dummies are before us tomorrow, so day 2. So check them out if you're listening to this. You want to get some day 2 coverage. We'll plug our Dynasty Dummies podcast. They're going live during the draft on day 2.
And Peter, my direct boss is English, so we kind of have a connection, so it's fine.
Yeah, we're basically cousins.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I want to say we got Bradley Ilatalo from DLF coming with us tomorrow night on Friday night. We've got Tyler Gee of the F3 podcast, co-host of the F3 podcast tomorrow night. So it's going to be awesome. So join us day 2 of the Drafter Party. With that, I'm Ryan Livergood. The last 3 standing, we've got Will Greenwood and Peter Howard with us. So anyway, good night, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Drafter Party Day 1.
Good night.
Can't wait to see all the Iowa players go tomorrow.